Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video. Are you sure I know I'll look ridiculous swatting at the air, but I'll take a swing at you if you ask me if I'm fine. It was all Charlie had said to her when she trudged down the stairs this morning, forfeiting any semblance of a good morning. No, she hadn't told him what had happened, and had no intentions to, though she was sure it would get brought up eventually if he ever got wise to her missing phone. His concern was still focused on her shoulder. Luckily, she had always been a crazy fast healer, which she supposed was nature's way of apologizing for making her ridiculously clumsy as a kid, and was able to ease his worries by letting him glimpse the now yellowish tint to her bruise. Even if he had still been against it, she would have argued until she got her way. She felt like something had changed between her and Jasper Saturday night, and was equally thrilled and nervous to see how he reacted to her today. Unfortunately, Charlie's hemming and hawing over her shoulder and then refusing to let her drive her despite the dent in the door perfectly operational. Well, maybe not perfectly, considering it rode pretty rough before the accident. Truck made her late again, so she wasn't able to see him in the parking lot, and she didn't see him in the hallway in between classes either. By the time lunch rolled around, her shoulders were slumped, and she had firmly convinced herself that he was deliberately avoiding her. In her frustration, she had once again snapped at Nang's concern. "That's not what's bothering me," she explained in an apologetic tone as she shuffled towards her locker. "The boy," Nan replied knowingly. "You don't have to say it. I get it. I'm crazy. I was just hoping. God, I don't know what I was hoping." Focusing on opening her locker, she didn't see the smug smile that stretched Nan's face. "Well, quit hoping, Chime," Nan whispered conspiratorially. "What?" Her back went rigid when she sensed someone come up behind her. 3 someones to be exact. "Bella, right?" Gathering her wits, she slowly turned around, raising an eyebrow as she faced the one who had spoken. Emmett, the goofy one, trying to hide the intimidation at being approached by half of the Vamp Brigade. Even if one of them was the one she really wanted to see, she reacted the way she usually did when uncomfortable, with sass. "No, Bella Swan, actually." Emmett's lips stretched into a wide, dimpled smile. "I think I like you already." "I'm flattered." "Whoa, dial it back some, Bella," she told herself. Emmett didn't seem to be particularly insulted, not once losing the smile on his face. "I know we've been sharing the same class for 2 weeks now, but just as a refresher, Emmett," Bella blurted before wincing slightly at her outburst. "I mean, I remember Rosie, right?" she asked timidly, pointing at the female member of the trio. "Call me Rose," she replied with a small quirk of her lips. Bella nodded, and Jasper, of course. This was said a little softer than the other two, a faint blush dusting her cheeks. It darkened when he nodded and flashed her a lopsided grin. She jumped when Emmett clapped loudly. "Well, now that we have that out of the way, you have to eat lunch with us today." Bella blinked. He won't leave you alone until you say yes," Rose warned. Bella was slightly shocked at the playfulness in her voice. She never expected the blonde beauty to be this personable. She had an air about her that screamed, if their lives were a movie, the vampires would be the socks and the humans the greasers. "And that's the last time I watched The Outsiders before going to bed." Emmett nodded, with false solemnity. Nan eyed the 3 contemplatively, seemingly weighing the honesty in their offer before giving a light nod. "It's really up to you, Chame." Bella snuck a peek at Jasper, who was giving her an encouraging grin. If you're sure." Emmett nodded and then smirked. "As long as you promise not to spit chocolate milk on me." Bella matched his smirk as she grabbed the medium-sized Tupperware container that had her lunch in it from her locker and closed it. "I have a hankering for juice today anyways." Slinging a heavy arm over her shoulder, Emmett began steering her in the direction of the cafeteria. "You know, I have a feeling we're going to be best friends." Why am I suddenly terrified at that thought? Emmett laughed uproariously while Rose chuckled softly beside him. She felt cool breath on her cheek as Jasper leaned in close. "Don't worry, darling. I'll protect you." Strangely, she didn't doubt it for a second. The pixie-like girl blinked up at her from the table, the beginnings of a sneer forming on her face. "What is this?" The arm that was still over her shoulder pulled her closer. "This is Bella," Emmett replied, like the answer should be obvious. "Bella, this is Alice and Edward." He nodded his head in their direction. "I know," Edward spoke lowly. There was an angry tinge to his voice that made Bella turn her head away from his penetrating stare and unconsciously step closer to Emmett. She flashed Jasper a hesitant smile when he pulled out a chair and encouraged her to settle in. "Thanks," she murmured before stiffening at the snotty tone of Alice's next words. "And why is she sitting here exactly?" "Oh, we're total biffles now," Emmett replied, plopping his own giant frame into one of the plastic chairs, which let out a small squealing whine in protest. Rosa was a bit classier in her seating, sliding so smoothly into her seat it put the queen to shame. Despite the obvious tension at the table, Bella groaned. "Please tell me he did not just say that." Jasper smirked. "He just said that." "She can't," Alice started to whine. "She is," Jasper spoke firmly, taking his own seat at the table. Bella shifted uneasily as Alice shoved back her chair, stood and stalked away, Edward trailing closely behind her. Maybe I shouldn't sit here. I didn't want to make things uncomfortable with your family." She pushed back her own chair, intending to stand up, but was stopped by a firm hand on her arm. She looked over into Jasper's melted honey gaze. "Stay, please?" "Yeah," Emmett agreed. "Don't mind Alice. You probably did us a favor. Anything's better than having to listen to 45 minutes about some fashion designer I can never pronounce correctly." "It's Batsily Mishka, Emmett, not Baghdad Mishmash," he mocked in a whiny falsetto. Bella chuckled. "Those barely even sound the same." Emmett grinned. "Never said, I didn't do it on purpose." Bella popped open the top of her container, which contained a mixture of fruit, and withdrew a slice of pineapple. Bringing it up to her lips, she paused as she eyed the otherwise empty tabletop. "Did you guys want to grab something?" Nan stood from her position, leaned up against the cafeteria window behind Emmett. "Naughty chime." Bella's eyes dropped. She hadn't done it to intentionally call them out. For a brief moment, she had actually forgotten that they weren't human. "We're good," Emmett chuckled. "Had a really big breakfast," Jasper muttered. There was a brief moment of awkward silence before Rose broke it. "So, Bella, where are you from?" Bella laughed. "Well, here. Technically, I was born here, but moved to Phoenix soon after my parents' divorce. I used to visit a lot in the summertime when I was a kid." Emmett chuckled. "Phoenix, huh? And how are you liking the balmy Forks weather?" "It's not bad." Jasper smirked. "You hate it." "I don't really hate it, per se." "You hate it," he repeated. "I dislike it," she countered. "Funny, I never would have guessed, not with you sitting outside all the time," he teased. Bella flushed and shrugged. "I just like the fresh air," she mumbled. Emmett grinned. "So, not only were you Bruce Lee in another life, but a polar bear as well." Bella cocked an eyebrow, the polar bear reference she understood. Bruce Lee. "The van..." Bella laughed uncomfortably. It had been easy to set Charlie's mind at ease, or at least semi-ease, about that. But somehow she doubted the excuse of cat-like reflexes would settle well with this three. "I, used to take gymnastics quite a bit when I was younger. I guess something stuck." Nan snorted. "You're not talking about that class your mother made you take at the YRU? It counts." "Sure, if quite a bit means 3 weeks and gymnastics means tumbling around doing somersaults and cartwheels on exercise mats. Fine, next time someone asks, I'll tell them my dead great-grandmother told me to jump out of the way. Happy?" Nan zipped her lips with a grin, and Bella was pulled back into the conversation by an amused Emmett. "Gymnastics, of course." Rose shoved his shoulder and smiled gently at her. "That's not what you should be asking. How are you doing anyways?" Bella smiled, so relieved at the topic change. It didn't even bother her that not only was she being asked how she was again, but that she got the sense that Rose wasn't just asking about the van incident either. She wondered exactly how much Jasper shared with the other two, and whether or not she should be mad about it. She decided now wasn't the time to stress about it anyways. "I'm good. I honestly think my truck and bag got the worst of it." "Your bag?" Rose asked. "Yeah, it got crushed under the tires. I've had that thing since junior high. I think it might have been someone's way of telling me to get a new one." Nan snickered. Emmett leaned forward. "And your truck? I noticed it wasn't in the parking lot when we got here this morning." Bella shrugged. "The door got banged up pretty bad. But according to Cheap, my dad's mechanic friend, it's still drivable. He doesn't seem to be entirely convinced, though. He insisted on driving me to school today, though saying the word dad felt a little rusty, referring to him as that after the accident had been the first time she used the word in years. She really didn't feel like answering the who, or the why do you call your father by his first name. Questions she was certain she'd get if she used the name Charlie. Having happened before in the past, she knew it was never a fun conversation to have, and usually ended with some variation of my parents would smack me if I ever tried calling them by their first names. Bella nibbled lightly on a slice of pear. So where are you guys originally from? She frowned slightly when the three exchanged a quick yet obviously uneasy look and felt the need to clarify. I mean, obviously I've heard the rumors around school, not that I paid much attention to them. It was pretty pointless when you knew the real truth about the Cullens. Jasper cleared his throat. Rumors? Bella's eyes widened. Not anything bad. If you didn't count the rude opinions of those obviously jealous of their wealth and beauty. Of course. Just mainly about you guys being relatively new to Forks yourselves and how you're all adopted. She said this word hesitantly, a little unsure about whether it was considered a taboo subject. Especially when asked by a girl they barely knew during lunchtime in a crowded cafeteria. Emmett's lips quirked slightly. Those rumors wouldn't happen to be of the incestuous sort, would they? Bella flushed and looked down at the table. While she hadn't put any stock in it, again, she was all real truth girl here. That particular rumor seemed to be a crowd favorite. It's not true, Rose commented lightly, though Bella could detect the slightest bit of disdain in her voice for the people who spread it around. Other than Jasper and I, none of us are directly related. Bella couldn't stop from glancing casually between Jasper and Rose, like she had noticed before, thanks to the similar color of hair, eyes, and skin tone, though those last two could easily be applied to the entire family, the two could believably pass as brother and sister. She wondered briefly why they even bothered with the lie before growing curious as to which particular angle they played with the whole thing. Older brother, younger sister, or perhaps the other way around. Seeing as how they were in the same grade, she had a pretty good idea what it was. Twins? Rose nodded. Fraternal, she clarified and flashed a grin at Jasper. Even though they may have been lying about their exact relations, Bella could clearly see the sisterly affection in that one smile, and the answering emotion in his own grin. Because of this, Bella decided to buy into the lie and play it up for their benefit, keeping her fingers crossed that she wasn't overdoing it on the enthusiasm. That's really neat. So can you guys, read each other's thoughts or feel what the other is feeling? There was a sputtering fit of laughter next to her, before Emmett managed to choke it off into a poorly disguised cough. He pushed himself back from the table and stood. I think I'm gonna go grab something to drink. His lips wobbled as he spoke, like he was trying desperately to stop them from smiling. Bella watched him walk away before turning back to Jasper and Rose with a confused look. Did I? Jasper's smile seemed forced when he answered, Don't mind him, he's an idiot. Bella could hear the restrained anger in his clipped words and fidgeted slightly in her chair, confused at what had set the whole thing off, and uneasy at unintentionally inciting some sort of confliction between the family members. Again, thankfully, her shifting proved to work at easing the tension at the table somewhat. When the movement disturbed a piece of jewelry that had previously been hidden in the fabric of her sweater and caught the light from the glaring fluorescence overhead, Bella looked down when Rose appeared to be staring quite intently at her chest area. Wondering if she had dribbled on herself, she sighed in relief when she realized her gaze was focused on the necklace that somehow managed to sneak its way out of its usual place beneath her t-shirt. She remembered that in her second period math class, the teacher had surprised the class with a pop quiz and that she had taken it out to fiddle with during a particularly difficult problem. That's a beautiful necklace. Thanks, Bella replied, fingering the small set of silver bell-shaped pendants. It was a gift from my great-grandmother. An inside joke, if you will. Silver bells? Jasper grinned. It's Christmas time in the settee, Emmett warbled badly, suddenly coming up behind Bella. He shot a grin at everyone who turned to look, including a startled Bella and a chastising Rose. Taking a deep breath to calm her pounding heart, Bella laughed. Exactly. Emmett settled back into the seat, placing his unopened can in front of him. Machine gave me the wrong kind. You want? Bella eyed the can of root beer and shrugged. Though she wasn't the biggest fan of pop, she was thirsty. Sure. She popped the tab when Emmett slid it across the table towards her and took a sip. Sorry about earlier. Inside joke, if you will. He smirked as he repeated Bella's line. She heard a dull thunk beneath the table and, judging from the frown that Jasper shot him, guessed he had just been kicked. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea. She warily addressed Nat. Obviously, whatever Emmett was alluding to pertained to their otherworldness in some way, and her presence was forcing them to go to almost childish lengths to hide it from her. Even if she didn't know what they were, she'd be suspicious as hell, and more than a little uncomfortable at this point, and probably practicing her "it's been fun, but I gotta grab something from my locker" speech. She snuck a quick peek up and eased somewhat at the look on Nan's face. She didn't seem to share Bella's concerns, and appeared to be vaguely amused at the whole thing. I'm amazed their secret has lasted as long as it has. They're quite terrible at subterfuge. Then again, I suppose they've never had to play it this close to the actual source before. Rose shot an exasperated look at the both of them before turning back to Bella. "So, your great-grandmother..." She tilted her head with genuine curiosity. Bella hesitated briefly, shifting her eyes between a still glaring Jasper and Emmett, who had lowered his eyes almost in. She frowned internally. "Submission... yeah, on my mother's side. We moved in with her when we left Forks. She practically raised me." Emmett and Jasper finally broke their staring contest to look at Bella. "What about your mom?" Emmett asked with a frown. Bella shrugged, slightly embarrassed at having said it in the first place. "She was around. She searched for the right word, doing her best to show neutrality despite the occasional bitterness she felt. Struggled with raising a daughter on her own." Emmett looked uneasy, probably uncomfortable for asking the question in the first place. "I'm sorry." "It's okay," she assured him with a small smile. "It was great, really. She taught me some really awesome things." She wasn't sure if the existence of vampires was on that particular list, like an appreciation for books and classic rock. "Favorite band?" Jasper asked with a grin, the tenseness from early seemingly gone. Leonard Skinner. His eyes lit up and his grin widened, and Bella felt herself responding in kind. "I'm talking original vinyl too. I'm pretty sure I was the only teenager in my entire school who even knew what a record player was." With the tumultuous emotions at the table eased, and the encouraging looks from the three at the table, not to mention the puffed, prideful stance of Nan, who was clearly basking in the glory of "my granddaughter is cool thanks to me," Bella continued. "She even taught me how to throw a punch." She chuckled lightly. "Although that one ended up doing more harm than good, and trust me when I say you have not lived until you get a sex talk involving a banana and a sliced and pitted avocado." She looked down distastefully at her lunch. "That put me off eating fruit for a few weeks." The table was completely silent, before the three broke into boisterous laughter, gaining looks of bewildered awe from the surrounding students. There was even the distant clang of a tray being dropped. Bella turned her head slightly to watch the boy scramble to pile the remainders of his lunch back on it, while shooting a look of terror in their direction, as if their laughter was a sign of his imminent doom. Bella allowed a brief moment of pity to rush through her for the three that were smiling at her as their laughter slowly tapered off. It was sad at how isolated they appeared to be because of people's awe and no doubt fear of them. She wasn't under any false impressions that this was the only place or the first time that it happened, or that it was solely their own doing. She even noticed Nan gazing at them with a saddened fondness. The visual alone, Jasper choked, before trailing off with a husky chuckle that sent shivers down Bella's spine. "She is officially the coolest grandmother ever," Emmett said in wide-eyed awe. "She sounds like she was a wonderful person," Rose agreed. "She's amazing, really?" "Oh, she's still alive." "No. She died when I was 11. I just kind of feel like she's always with me, you know?" She fought the urge to give a snickering Nan the stink eye. She dropped her head, almost ashamed to face the genuine sympathetic looks that was now on all of their faces, and busied herself with snapping the cover back on her container. When she raised her eyes, Jasper was tilting his head slightly. She could see questions churning in his beautiful golden gaze, but she could see his hesitation as well, and grew apprehensive when he finally opened his mouth. "What?" The bell rang, interrupting whatever he was going to say, and Bella felt her shoulders slump with relief when Emmett immediately jumped up from the table. Rose cocked an amused eyebrow at him as she stood up from the chair, as gracefully as she slid into it. "What's your hurry?" "As you well know, Rose, history waits for no man," he replied diplomatically. Bella, who was smiling shyly up at Jasper as he pulled her chair out, frowned humorously at Emmett. That's not exactly how." Jasper leaned towards again. "Let him have this one," he whispered in her ear as Emmett and Rose turned to leave. "Okay," she agreed goofily as Jasper placed his hand on her lower back and steered her towards the cafeteria exit. After a brief stop at her locker, they headed towards their history class, entering the room as a group. Bella, distracted slightly by Emmett's wildly enthusiastic play-by-play of some video game she really had no interest in, more amused by the manic movements of his hands and the expressions on his face. Then the actual game almost missed the double take. The teacher shot the quartet when they entered. She frowned, slightly insulted by his reaction, which almost mirrored those they had been given in the cafeteria. She wondered if it was more because she was hanging out with them, or if it was that they were hanging out with her that was causing it. She was just barely starting to crawl her way out of the strange new girl stigma, which had been hampered slightly by the van incident, and now this. She wondered if all the extra scrutiny was worth it. As Jasper's firm hand on her back guided her into her seat, and its owner smiled down at her, she decided it just might be. This project will be worth 30% of your mark. Jasper once again found himself tuning the teacher out as he stared thoughtfully at the head of soft mahogany waves in front of him. Lunch had gone better than he hoped. Bella had been clearly apprehensive when they first approached her. He blamed Emmett's insistence on barreling into things headfirst for that, and while the open hostility from Alice and Edward hadn't helped Alice, he had expected, but the dark eyes and the thinly veiled fury churning through Edward's emotions threw him a little. And he made a note to bring it up with Rose and Emmett later. It had all but disappeared when they finally eased her into a conversation. While he wasn't surprised that Emmett had taken to her so quickly, the same couldn't be said for Rose. Though she had been the one to suggest the idea in the first place, he hadn't expected her to be as kind to Bella as she had. While he didn't doubt that his retelling of the events that had happened Saturday night had softened her towards Bella, it still didn't stop him from being shocked at the genuine affection he felt trickling through Rose's emotions with each passing minute. Seriously, who was this girl that managed to achieve such impossible feats without even trying, or knowing what she was doing? And that wasn't all that confused him about her. He had thought that being closer to her would help him get a better lock on her emotions, and try to figure out why they didn't feel the same as everyone else. It wasn't that he couldn't feel them that bothered him, because he could, but how they felt like they had been passed through a filter. They were just so pure. Human emotions were tricky things and were like opening a box of crayons these days. It wasn't simply blue, red, and green. No, it was periwinkle blue, robin's egg blue, fire engine red, strawberry red, forest green, aquamarine, etc. So many different names for so many similar colors, right up until you're pulling out the damn macaroni and cheese and you're so overwhelmed your head starts to hurt. Years ago, during what would be their third trip through high school, Edward had told him that he was lucky he only could feel their emotions and not have to read their minds. He began regaling Jasper with a few choice thoughts from a girl that was apparently considering suicide, moaning about her dark thoughts and milking the woe is me for having to hear them for all it was worth. Jasper had stared at him for a long moment before blasting him with a mix of misery, defeat, fear, and self-loathing. A lethal cocktail powerful enough to bring a whimpering Edward to his knees. You may have to hear it, but this is what she feels. What I feel, he had hissed. Edward never brought the subject up again. Vampires were easier, their emotions largely numbed by an eternity of stagnancy. He could almost count the number of emotions they felt on one hand, usually cycling between boredom, anger, hunger, and cynicism. His own little family was an exception to this, usually adding love, humor, and happiness to the mix, or at least as close as they could get to it. The Cullens exhibited similar ones as well, but theirs was tainted slightly by the desperate need to fit in, to mimic humanity. Bella's was different because they didn't overwhelm him. Instead, they, like her intoxicating scent, just sort of flowed in the background, as clear as babbling brook, so calm and steady and simple. So that instead of focusing on them, which is all his gift seemed to let him do most days and was one of the reasons he was so uncomfortable around humans, he was simply able to focus on her. He wondered if the bond had something to do with it. Admittedly, he was a little confused with a few of her misplaced emotions. The embarrassment after asking them about lunch, the uneasiness when Emmett asked her about the van, the shame when they finished the talk about her nan right before the bell rang. Her actions at the table were unusual as well. Occasionally, he'd see her quickly flick an imperceptible look over Emmett's shoulder. Had it been anyone else, he would have been suspicious, but he couldn't sense the least bit of duplicity in her, and he hoped that their mating bond wasn't clouding his judgment. He had already gone through something like that once before, with a woman he thought was his mate, and it was one of the many moments in his tarnished history that he had no interest in repeating. Speaking of history, he snapped back to attention when Mr. Hill began winding down his explanation. Work in groups of 2 or 3. Ooh, Emmett interjected, waving his hand wildly in the air. We'll forework. Fine, Mr. McCarty. It was spoken with the tired finality of a man who knew it would be pointless to argue. Jasper growled lowly as the boy in front of Bella turned to her with a flirtatious grin. Hey, do you want... Lay off, dude. That's my BFF you're talking to. Us three, Emmett stressed, whirling his finger in the direction of the three of them, have got that shit on lockdown. Mr. McCarty, Mr. Hill's voice strained. Sorry, Teach, Emmett called out unapologetically as he continued to glare at the boy until he turned back in his seat with a gulp. He watched Bella cock an eyebrow before shaking her head. Do I even get a say in this? She asked Emmett, amused. Nope. Jasper shook his head with a grin when she turned to him for confirmation. I suppose, she sighed in mock exasperation. Emmett rubbed his hands together with glee. We are so gonna ace this. Bella nodded in agreement, before her face twisted in a frown. Wait a minute, that first week didn't you claim that Joan of Arc was Noah's wife? Jasper hesitated briefly at the bottom of the steps outside the school. He had been a little unsure at meeting Bella at her locker after school and offering to walk her out, but judging by the smile that lit up her face and the genuine pleasure in her emotions, she had been very receptive to it. Now he was hoping to get the chance to bask in her presence for just a few minutes more. Hey, you, need a ride home? She smiled at him before wincing slightly as she pointed out the police car off to the side that was making a poor attempt at being inconspicuous. I'd like to, but it seems as if my ride's already here. He shifted the strap across his chest in an attempt to keep his hands busy lest they reach out and pull her to him. He had spent the whole lunch hour and half of history class as they discussed the project, fighting the urge to touch her in some way. Whether it be to hold her hand or tangle his fingers in her hair, or his eyes flicked down to her pink lips as she slicked her tongue across them. I should get going, she said nervously. My dad has to get back to work. He's the police chief. He can go back whenever he wants to, he wanted to say, but settled for nodding jerkily instead. I'll see you tomorrow, he asked. Yeah, his eyes widened slightly, hope paralyzing him when she began reaching a hand out, before embarrassment quickly flooded through her. His shoulders slumped when she snatched it back, awkwardly raising it to run her fingers shakily through her hair. I'll, see you. Bye, you guys, she threw over his shoulder before turning and swiftly cutting across the school parking lot. Jasper turned, frowning at the amused looks on Emmett and Rose's face. Sure you don't want to go after her? Emmett asked, a large grin stretching his face. Sweep her off her feet and plant a big ol'... Shut up, Jasper grumbled, stalking past him and getting into the car, slamming the door like a petulant child, for good measure. He glanced out the window and saw Emmett waving his arms before sliding behind the wheel, Rose following suit on the passenger side. She glanced over her shoulder with a sympathetic smile. Don't worry, you'll see her tomorrow. Jasper grinned faintly as Emmett started the engine. Actually, I'll be seeing her a lot sooner than that. How was your day, Bells? Bella looked over at a mildly expectant Charlie. It was... She looked out the window and caught the tail end of Emmett waving his hands exuberantly in her direction. Good. Really good. Bella buried her head in her pillow. I'm sorry, I don't speak pillow. Could you repeat that? She flipped over and eyed Nan. I like them, she grudgingly admitted. And that's a bad thing? Bella shot her an incredulous stare. Didn't you basically warn me to stay away from them? Have I told you that lately? Arg. Bella threw her arm over her eyes. Would you stop being so evasive? She heard Nan sigh. All right, I've had a feeling that something like this might happen. Bella sat up and glared. You said you weren't psychic. I'm not, Nan replied, defensively. If you stop to consider it, it's two sides of the same coin, really. I get the sense that something is wrong sometimes, and now I'm feeling that something is right. She eyed Bella knowingly. You feel it too, don't you? Bella flopped back down. Yes, she grumbled. A sudden loud banging from downstairs startled her and her brow furrowed. Who would be knocking on the door? Charlie had went back to work as soon as he dropped her off at the house, but not before she made him swear that he'd get his buddy to look over her truck and wouldn't be off for a few hours. So she doubted it could be for him. Who's that? She wondered out loud. Nan disappeared, appearing again just before the second succession of knocks. Answer the door, Chime, she said with a wide, mischievous smile. Now Bella was nervous. She tentatively slid off the bed and made her way out the door. I'll just wait up here, Nan called cheerfully as Bella walked down the stairs. Taking a deep breath, she flung open the door, immediately wide-eyed when she saw who was on the other side. Hiya! Jasper smirked. Haven't we already been there before? She blinked, and he grinned sheepishly. I wasn't sure if you were going to answer the door. I wasn't sure if you were home, but I wasn't sure if you'd answer. Careful, Jasper, your vampire is showing. She felt the urge to play with him a bit. How'd you even know I was here? Your truck was in the driveway. The truck he knew she didn't even drive to school today. She let him sweat for a few more minutes, strangely enjoying that he looked seconds away from squirming uncomfortably, before breaking out into a welcoming grin. What are you doing here? Anyways, not that I'm... She trailed off when she noticed the bag in his hand. Is that... He nodded with a shy smile. I meant to give these to you at school today, but it slipped my mind. He handed over the bag and she cracked it open to stare at the completely intact copies of the books she had bought the other day. Oh, and this too, he added, digging in the pocket of his leather jacket and withdrawing a very familiar cell phone. How are these even still there? I thought surely they'd be ruined or stolen by now. I actually went back down that same night to get them, he admitted softly. Were those guys still long gone? Was he telling the truth? Or had he done something to them? Something more, she should say. Though she wasn't sure what it was exactly, she knew he was somehow responsible for their bizarre reactions that night. I really don't care if he did, she realized. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. She had to turn away, fidgeting slightly under the intense stare he fixed on her when he said it. There's actually something else, too. She sat the bag of books to the side of the door as he jogged the short distance to his truck and reached through the partially cranked window. When he came back, he was clutching something made of what looked like leather. I noticed you were carrying your books today, and you said your bag was destroyed, so I thought, he finished with a slightly embarrassed shrug as he passed it to her. Bella looked down, running her fingers over the supple leather of the messenger bag. It wasn't new, she could tell by the buttery smoothness of the material that it had been well broken in. It was mine, he explained. But Rose got me a new one for my birthday. Was it just her, or did he stumble over that word? So, it's just been lying around the house. I figured you might like to use it. It's all right if you don't, he hurriedly assured. Like to use it? It took all her willpower not to squeal out yes, and rub the damn thing all over herself like a bitch in heat the minute he had said, it was mine. In all sincerity, he could have stopped right there. If you're sure? She demurely asked instead, hoping the wobble in her voice was adequately covered. Her heart flip-flopped when he grinned and nodded. Thanks, she offered shyly. Did you maybe want to come in? She looked over her shoulder in the direction of the kitchen. I was gonna fix myself a snack, and... She closed her eyes, her features twisting into a grimace as she realized that once again she forgot, before she smoothed them out into a placid smile and turned back to face him. As she expected, he looked uncomfortable again. Note to self, quit mentioning food. She felt a thrum of pity that such a simple thing that they couldn't help but be exposed to on pretty much an everyday basis could cause such discomfort. She wonders what it would feel like to never be able to eat your favorite foods again, and whether or not they even remember what it tastes like. She thinks it might be that distant memory, that constant reminder of their lost humanity that makes them uncomfortable around it. Thanks, but Esme will probably have supper on the table when I get home. It was spoken causally enough to almost be believable if he had been able to control the slight tick of his jaw when he said it. Nan was right. He was pretty terrible at acting human, up close, and she wondered how, after all these years, he wasn't better at it. Maybe she only noticed it because she knew the truth. Esme? She asked, her curiosity piqued. Was that the name of the woman? Well, vampire. Nan had seen talking on the phone that day. He nodded. Yeah, Esme and Carlisle Cullen. They're our foster parents. There was definitely something in his voice when he said that, a little too subtle to detect. But she sensed some unresolved issues and decided that it was best to let the subject drop for the moment. Okay, well, she trailed off awkwardly. I'll see you at school then, she asked shyly. The tenseness disappeared from his face as he smiled. Definitely, he agreed eagerly. Bye, she replied softly. Bye, he agreed, turning to leave and seemingly forgetting the small set of stairs behind him. He stumbled down them, his feet landing heavily on the pebbled driveway, and she watched his shoulders slump before he twisted around and ran a sheepish hand through his hair. Bella stifled a giggle behind her hand, certain that if he was capable of it, he'd be blushing 10 shades of red right now. Need some help getting to your truck? Bella asked, amused. She was pleased when he chuckled, glad that he seemed to be able to laugh at himself. "I think I can manage, darling." Her breath hitched when the endearment passed his lips. The drawl in his words more prominent, and it was her turn to blush as a raging heat swept through her body. "Okay, bye," she yelped, swinging the door shut and leaning her flushed cheek against the cool grain of the wood. On the other side, she could hear a low, husky chuckle, which was soon cut off by a slamming door and the sound of his truck engine roaring to life. Bella lingered by the door, clutching the bag to her chest, and waited for the sound of the truck to fade completely. When she was certain it was gone, she looped her hand around her bag of books before floating dreamily up the stairs and into her bedroom. Dumping the plastic bag on the floor, she fell back onto the bed, her arms wrapped around his. No, her messenger bag. Nan chuckled. "So, what did Ranger want?" She paused when the words registered and propped herself up on her elbows. "What did you just say?" "I asked what he..." "What who?" Nan grinned. "Ranger," Bella groaned. While it was true, Nan would assign just about everyone she knew with a nickname. More specifically, she would only refer to the people she actually liked, or at least tolerated, with said nickname. And you could usually tell how much she liked them by how, polite the nickname was. "You've nicked them already, haven't you?" Nan shrugged unapologetically as her smile grew. "They've grown on me." Well, that pretty much settled it. If they already got the equivalent of a thumbs up from Nan, who was a firm believer of choosing your friends wisely after only a single day of talking to them, then she'd have to be friends with them. The thought didn't bother her in the slightest. It was surprisingly easy to be friends with them. Within days, they had fallen into a routine, and she was sure her body was thankful that it no longer had to sit out in the cold. Now that she was a permanent fixture at what had been dubbed the Cullen table. It was a good thing she was used to being stared at and whispered about, because it practically tripled the minute she parked her ass at the table for the second time. Apparently, once was almost unheard of, but twice. That was right up there with witnessing the second coming. She had no less than 10 people come up to her in those first few weeks asking how you do it, how she did what exactly she wasn't sure. The closest she ever got to clarification was some random guy in a Star Trek t-shirt, mumbling something about penetrating the force field before breaking into creepy giggles. Things didn't really ease up between her and the other two Cullens at the table either. Many times she would be tempted to simply get up and leave. Edward's stalker stare was enough to turn just about anyone off their lunch. But it seemed the second the thought entered her head, Jasper was laying his cool fingers on her hand, arm or shoulder. A small smile would be on his face and a warm look in his eyes, as he found some way to distract her back into the conversation. Of course she'd be a puddle of goo after that, not sure if she was even capable of standing if she wanted to. The power struggle at the table went on for a straight week. Bella had to admit her nerves were a little fried by then, before Alice and Edward's spots were mysteriously vacant. The next week, and Jasper had casually informed her that they found somewhere else to eat. She didn't even want to imagine what that meant, and they didn't just hang out at school either, but at their house as well. She had finally met the elder Cullens and started to understand the mild strain that had been in Jasper's voice when he mentioned them that day. After they sat together at lunch for the first time, they didn't seem to share any of the same characteristics that either Emmett or Rose, who Jasper obviously had a very strong bond with, had, and instead reminded her more of Edward and Alice's personality. She had no idea how they all got along at home, but considering that Jasper seemed to barely tolerate those two most days at school, it wasn't surprising that he'd have a difficult time getting along with what was basically their older counterparts. It had been uncomfortable, to say the least. They were polite and welcoming, sure, but there was a stiffness to their interactions, a falseness that felt almost scripted, and their efforts to play human left her feeling a tad unsettled. When it came to hiding what they were, Jasper still had his tense moments, and Emmett usually had the subtlety of a rhino most days, but she'd take their poor efforts of keeping their secrets, well, secret over the Stepford duo. She wondered if they realized the whole white picket fence routine was probably just as terrifying as the "we're vampires" bit. People in this town certainly didn't avoid them and talk about them because they knew the truth. Being that she was technically on their turf, Nan always kept her guard up. She agreed that something wasn't right about the heads of house either. Not that it was bad, just that it was off. Bella suspected it had something to do with the obvious favoritism that the two showed Alice and Edward whenever she was around, always asking if they could, please move whatever they were doing to another room, if either one decided to complain, which was often. But she hadn't let any of that bother her. instead simply taking the time to get to know the three people that she was rapidly growing to care for. Two as family and one as something more. It was her shifting feelings that made her realize that there was still a barrier there, a big old fat elephant in the room. They knew it as well. She could tell every time Jasper, Rose, or Emmett made eye contact in the room, and they seemed to be having a silent conversation. Or she'd look at Jasper in the middle of a movie or game and catch the pensive look on his face. She constantly debated with Nan on whether or not just to sit them all down and blurt out, "Look, I know." Nan, always the voice of reason, would calmly tell her, "When they're ready, they'll tell you." And each day, a little niggling voice in the back of her head wondered when that day would be. It had taken 3 weeks in total. 3 weeks of raising an eyebrow whenever Emmett cracked a controller in his exuberant gameplay. 3 in total. 3 weeks of hearing the excuse, "I'm not hungry," whenever she coyly asked them if they wanted a bite of whatever she happened to be eating. 3 weeks that finally concluded with 2 days of an impromptu family trip, which conveniently coincided with the first 2 real sunny days Forks had had since she got here. Something Nan deemed very interesting. She thinks that might have been the clincher. Their family trip had unfortunately fallen on the exact 2 days that had been set aside for class presentation for the history project. Emmett had been so adamant on her partnering up with them. She had been given leeway by the teacher the first day, but when they failed to show up for the second day, Mr. Hill, who she had long suspected didn't particularly care for Jasper or Emmett, had forced her to present it herself. Thankfully, the project had been complete for days and entrusted to her for safekeeping. At the time, she had felt very confident with the work they had produced, but with the judgmental eyes of the teacher and the entire class on her, she had found herself stumbling and mumbling through the entire thing. She was sure her face had been red throughout the majority of it. She had refused all their calls that night, and the next 2 days at school couldn't help but be a little distant, barely saying a word to them at lunch or in class, despite the profuse apologies. When school finally let out for the week, she came straight home and told Charlie she was feeling sick and that she was going to bed early. Hours later, she was curled on her bed, listening to Charlie relay the lie to Jasper, who she knew would visit, as Nan hovered by her bed, shaking her head. "This isn't the way to do it, Chime." Is that what she was doing? Was she intentionally trying to force them into telling her their secret? She remembers how embarrassed she had been in the beginning whenever she accidentally brought up the subject of food, how she told herself to steer clear of mentioning it since it obviously made them uncomfortable. But for the last 3 weeks, she wouldn't hesitate to ask whenever she had something edible in her hand. The worst part is that deep down, she knew exactly what she was doing. She just wasn't willing to admit it at the time. Her cheeks reddened with shame. Oh God. Disgusted with herself, she finally took Jasper's call the next day and was tempted to smack herself at the subdued tone in his voice when he invited her over. She swallowed the lump in her throat and stuttered out an agreement. He was waiting for her on the steps when she drove up, an unreadable look on his face. Bella hesitated, her hands curled around the steering wheel, keeping her eyes straight ahead as she watched Jasper approach her. She addressed Nan, who she had asked to come with her for support. "What if he's decided I'm not worth the trouble?" "It's not going to come to that, Chime." The assurance in her voice was enough to ease Bella into finally turning the engine off. Jasper held open the door as she slid from the cab. She stared at him for a few desperate moments, trying to see if there was any indication of what he was thinking or feeling. For some reason, it felt like it had been forever since she had seen him. He looked amazing as always, but there was sadness in his darkened eyes and defeat in his slumped shoulders. Bella wanted to cry. She had done that to him. "I'm sorry," she blurted at the same time he said. "Can we—" They both stopped, nervous chuckles rolling off their lips. "You first," he murmured. "I'm sorry," she repeated, "for ignoring you. I was just frustrated at the situation." She wanted desperately to blurt out everything, but found herself chickening out. "I wasn't looking forward to doing the project in the first place, and when you guys bailed on me, I let my anger get the best of me." "It's all right, darling." The pensive look that Bella had grown very familiar with over the last few weeks settled on his face as he inhaled loudly. "There's actually a little more to it." "And what we told you—" This was it, but she didn't know if she should even hear it. Not now that she felt like she had forced him into it. Nan was right. He should be able to tell her when he's ready. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to." He stared at her with a confused frown, and she wondered if he got the thinly veiled double meaning behind her words. "Will you take a walk with me?" he finally asked. Wordlessly, she nodded, and with a sudden burst of boldness, reached over and laced her fingers with his. Jasper led the way, unconsciously rubbing his thumb across her hand and appreciating the softness of her skin. To say he was surprised that she not only agreed to come here in the first place after the borderline icy reception at school, but was now trustingly following him through the dense foliage behind his house, would be an understatement. Ever since those sunny days when they were forced to stay home, he got the sense she was pulling away from them a little, though the affection was still present in her emotions when she accepted their excuse with a small nod. It was now tinged in bitterness and disappointment. The feelings just about killed him, and deciding he never wanted to experience them again. With the full support of Rose and Emmett, he had let the Cullens know that he intended to tell Bella everything. Alice and Edward had reacted with outright hostility, the former telling him he was making a big mistake. Carlisle and Esme had been reluctant as well, until he made it very clear he wasn't asking for permission. If he was honest with himself, his choice had been made the minute he saved her from those men in the empty lot, the minute he knew she was his mate. Bella's labored breath brought him back to the moment, and he realized they had been walking for a good 10 minutes, at least, over some very uneven and difficult terrain. Deeming this to be a decent enough distance away from the house, he had been tempted to bring her to the hideaway, but seeing as how it could only be reached on foot and would take at least 2 hours going at a human pace, he had nixed the idea. He stopped and turned to Bella. His eyes ran over her beautiful features, committing every last nuance, from the flecks of dark green in her eyes, indiscernible to the human eye unless you were standing nose to nose with her, to the light smattering of freckles dusted across the bridge of her nose and flushed cheeks, to memory. He was worried that this would be the last time he saw her. "Remember that night when I told you I wasn't like other guys?" She nodded slowly. "I meant it in ways you couldn't possibly imagine." He paused. "My last name isn't really Hale, it's Whitlock, and I was born in Houston, Texas, on January 7th. He inhaled loudly. 1844. Finishing his story, Jasper rolled down his sleeves. He had pushed up to illustrate his past, once again hiding the various vampire bites that covered his arms. His eyes had been turned away through the majority of it, shame coloring his voice. "We're not your regular vampires, at least not the kind you read in horror stories or see in movies. We don't sleep in coffins, or at all. And other than blood, animal blood," he stressed. "We can't eat. Holy water, crosses, stakes, sunlight, none of it hurts us. Our skin is tough, resilient, hardened by the venom running through our veins, which makes us practically invincible. But that same venom is a weakness as well. It's highly flammable, and really the only real way you can kill us. But you have to." He grimaced. "Disassemble us first. They did get our strength and speed right, for the most part, and the fact that we never age. We're essentially frozen in time," he finished touchively. Realizing he'd spent the better part of 10 minutes telling his entire life story to the ground, he finally looked up at Bella, steeling himself for the fear and disgust he was certain would be marring her chocolate eyes. He was surprised to see that she looked thoughtful instead. "Whitlock, huh? It suits you." Jasper gaped at her. "Please tell me that's not all you got from that conversation. I'm trying to tell you that the Cullens we're vampires." As adorable as the stumbled explanation was, Bella decided to take pity on him. "I know. Excuse me? I guess it's only fair that, since you told me your secret, I should tell you mine." She inhaled loudly, then lowered her voice to a terrified whisper. "I see dead people." She managed to hold a straight face for a few long seconds before breaking into peals of laughter. "I've always wanted to say that," she said, in between large gulps of air. The laughter tapered off when she noticed the bewildered and slightly hurt look. He no doubt thought she was mocking him on his face and immediately felt guilty. "I'm sorry," she soothed, reaching over to rub his arm affectionately. "I wasn't laughing at you," she sighed. "I should probably clarify. I see a dead person." Pain darkened his beautiful golden eyes. "Not you, you doof." "Oh God," she groaned. "I'm doing this all wrong, aren't I?" Desperately needing to erase the hurt etched on his handsome features, the hand she had unknowingly kept resting on his arm trailed up to cup a smooth, cool cheek. "You, Emmett, and Rose are more alive than anyone I've ever met," she murmured. "And you make me feel more alive, too." The air around them grew still and silent as Jasper's eyes fluttered close and he raised his own hand to engulf the one resting on his cheek. It was broken when Bella heard Nan sigh. "How lovely!" Embarrassed, she snatched her hand back and glared at the ground, catching Nan's contrite look out of the corner of her eye. Well, it was, Nan muttered defensively. The moment officially gone, Bella awkwardly cleared her throat. Well, you know my great-grandmother Marie, the one who gave me this necklace, she asked, gesturing towards the small silver bells. Jasper stared at her for a moment, his eyes an unreadable storm of emotion before finally conceding a nod. Yes, the one who passed away a few years ago. Well, I've never stopped seeing and talking to her. What? She's actually here right now. I sure am, Nan piped up. Bella turned her head slightly. Obviously he can't hear you, she chastised. Jasper shifted his eyes in the direction she had spoken, and seeing nothing more than the trunk of a large oak, skepticism quickly flashed over his face. Not quickly enough, though. Oh, Bella huffed. You tell me you're a vampire, and I believe you immediately, but I tell you I see my dead Nan, and suddenly I'm the crazy one. It's not that, it's just... Fine, Bella cut him off, abruptly turning her back to him. Don't leave, Jasper pleaded, lightly clamping his hands on her shoulders to keep her in place. I'm not leaving, Bella replied, reaching up to pat his hand. I'm going to prove it. Turn around. What? Seriously, are all vampires this childishly stubborn? Between you and Emmett's full-on goofiness, you're really blowing the whole vampires are badass theory out of the water, aren't you? At this point, I think the Count from Sesame Street is more threatening than you guys. Adopting a heavy Dracula-esque accent, she continued with her ribbing. Von stubborn vampire. She chuckled at the strangled-affronted sound behind her, followed by a petulant mumble that, sounding an awful lot like, show you who's a badass vampire. You do know that's basically the equivalent of insulting my manhood, right? The petulant tone still tinged his words. Well, I swear I'll start on that next if you don't turn around. Her neck prickled and she was certain he was staring at her. Finally he shifted and she felt the comforting pressure of his back against hers. She shivered slightly at the sensation. Why do I have to be turned around too? So you know I'm not peeking? Peeking at what? Hold some fingers up, she instructed, eyeing Nan, who nodded, drifting over to position herself in front of Jasper. Ready, she called. What? Don't you dare say what again, Whitlock. She was really enjoying the way the name rolled off her tongue. Just do it. It was silent for a second before her Nan called out, 4, chime. You're holding up 4 fingers, Bella replied confidently. She felt the muscles in Jasper's back tense slightly. 6 now, chime. Bella quickly rattled off that one, then the next and the next, correctly guessing 6 in a row, including the 3.5, and when he flashed 5 of his fingers in 4 quick successions before Nan chuckled at the final one. Doesn't surprise me that this boy's southern, he's got as much sass in him as you do. Shame. It didn't take much for Bella to guess what Jasper had just done. Nan really doesn't appreciate you giving her the finger, Whitlock. Haven't you ever been told to respect your elders? She paused with a laugh, as she did the quick calculations in her head. Although I guess, technically, you'd be hers. Still chuckling, she turned, her movement encouraging him to do the same. Shock was painted all over his face, but there was a mixture of reluctance and worry in his eyes. Bella was disappointed. You still don't believe me, do you? It's not that, he sighed. There's something I left out of my story. Bella's face fell with resignation. As vague as he tried to be about how exactly he came to live with the Cullens, she already knew what was coming. I know, you and Alice, right? He frowned in confusion. What? As much as it hurt her to say it, she knew it couldn't be avoided forever. You two are together, aren't you? We were, he admitted. Was that guilt strange for a time? He closed his eyes. Okay, that was definitely guilt on his face. A long time, but it's been over for a while. How long is a while? Bella wondered if he could hear the vulnerability and thinly veiled hope in her words. A few years before we moved to Forks, she wanted to ask why it ended, but felt like she was getting too personal. Too soon. Instead, she offered a softly mumbled, sorry, which he returned with a small smile. It's all right. So, something you left out, Bella questioned in an attempt to get them back on track. Jasper gave his head a bit of a shake and nodded. Right. Well, besides being a vampire, me, Alice, and Edward have a little something extra. Bella raised an eyebrow, unable to stop the instinctive reaction to scan his body. Somehow she doubted he was referring to an extra appendage, though. Extra? Bella encouraged. I guess you'd call them gifts, depending on how you looked at it. I can feel and manipulate other people's emotions. He trailed off when he noticed the look on her face. But I never used it on you. He paused. Okay. So actually I have, he hurried to assure her. But only the feeling part. I can't really control that as well as the other. You felt me, Bella asked, then blushed heavily when a slow smirk spread across Jasper's lips. I meant, you know what I meant, ass, she grumbled. He had enough common sense to take the high road. I have, he agreed, but nothing bad, I promise. It's actually nice. Your emotions, I mean, they're always so calm, steady. It's almost comforting. It's been a really nice change, he mused wistfully. Bella couldn't stop the overpowering rush of affection if she tried, and judging by the tender look he gave her, he felt it. She turned her face away shyly, settling her eyes on Nain's and allowing her comforting and loving smile to ease her tumultuous thoughts. And the others, she managed. Well, Alice can see the future. Bella noticed the concerned look on Nat's face before her eyes narrowed with something akin to suspicion. I don't like the sound of that chain. Bella remembered the angry look on Alice's face the day the van had just barely missed hitting her and grew uncomfortable. Neither did she. The future? You mean everyone's or just her own? For the large part, it's hers. But anyone who spends a significant amount of time around her is vulnerable to it. Vulnerable? What a peculiar word. Judging from the raised eyebrow from Nan, she thought so too. Rose refers to it as sinking her mind hooks into you. She's had to ask Alice repeatedly to stop looking into her future. Bella was surprised. Why? I figured you guys would appreciate something like that, especially with the difficulties that undoubtedly come with being a vampire. The problem is that they're subjective to change, sometimes with hundreds of possibilities and outcomes. Think of it like someone with a remote in their hands, and they can't decide what to watch. A dark shadow passed through his eyes. Alice also has a tendency to share or encourage only the ones that benefit her. Nan looked anxious to hear more, and Bella wondered if it would be cool to just blurt out, I think your ex tried to kill me. And Edward. Edward, he can read minds. So that explains some of the apprehension earlier. And you think I'm doing something similar, right? For a minute there, yeah. What changed your mind? Jasper lowered his head and rubbed his neck sheepishly. Bella was certain that if his blood was circulating, he'd be blushing right now. I was, thinking some things in your direction while we were talking. Some things? What? Nan snickered and Bella's eyes widened. You horn dog. Jasper had the decency to look ashamed, turning his head away. But Bella could see the mischievous smile fighting to escape. Not like I could control it around you anyways, darlin', he mumbled just loud enough for her to hear. Bella was getting really tired of blushing around him, so she fought the rising redness by replacing it with forced indignation instead. How do you know I can't? She fumbled for words. Turn it off and on like a light switch. She finished. Because Edward can't, and he's the only telepath I've ever met. Even after almost 90 years, he still has no control over it. He hears everyone's thoughts, all the time. To be honest, I don't think he even tried to erect barriers. He complains about it all the time, but I think he gets some sort of sick pleasure out of knowing everyone's business. Me, Rose, and Emmett have had to come up with our own ways of keeping him out. How? His gift only works if you're roughly in the same vicinity, which includes anywhere in the house. So if we're unable to find some reason to leave when he's around, we just occupy our mind with something else. I usually repeat the most monotone history book I've ever read, verbatim. Rose will alphabetize a list of car parts or models, and Emmett, well, he just thinks about sex. Bella rolled her eyes. Obviously, and Edward hasn't realized this yet. Oh, he knows. There's just nothing he can do about it. We have it down to such a fine art that he hasn't been able to hear our thoughts in decades. Huh? Bella said, completely at a loss for words. She blankly scanned the area, catching the amusement and concern warring on Nain's face. What is it? She questioned, deciding to keep her conversation strictly mental for the time being. Whether Jasper believed her or not, it obviously made him a bit uncomfortable. A part of her was strangely proud that she managed to make a vampire uneasy. Nan, though, had no need for such concerns and stuck to speaking out loud. It's like the vampire discovery all over again. What do you mean? You're taking it rather well, Nan said, repeating the words she had said the first day she had noticed the Cullens, Hales, McCartys, Whitlocks. Jesus. What was she supposed to call them all now? Taking what well? The fact that Ranger here just told you that there's a vampire in the family that reads minds. Blink, blink. Oh my God. Her head whipped back to Jasper. Edward can read minds? She half shrieked. Jasper's eyes lightened with mirth. Finally catching up to the rest of the class, Miss Swan. She couldn't even spare a moment to appreciate how delicious that sounded coming from him. So he's been creeping around in my thoughts since day one. She really did not like the sound of that. It was possibly even worse than the future bit. That meant he heard everything. All the time she resorted to childish name-calling whenever she was reluctantly near him. That stupid rhyme that could never stop running through her mind. Deadward Edwards got a big headward. She cringed now even thinking about it. Then there was all the thoughts about Alice and how uncomfortable she was around her. How bitter she was about the obvious relationship. Even if it was in the past, her and Jasper, she almost swallowed her tongue. He had heard all her private thoughts about him, all her hopes, dreams, and desires that she could never stop from dancing through her head when he was around, and even when he wasn't. Those were her most treasured thoughts, and knowing they had been violated had her 2 seconds away from hyperventilating. The rational voice of Nan broke through her panic. It doesn't make sense, sweetheart. He hasn't reacted to our mental conversations once. It inched closer to DEFCON 0 thanks to Jasper's furrowed brow. Or at least the vampire equivalent of a furrowed brow. Actually, now that I consider it, I don't think he has. You don't? Bella really needed reassurance. Around us, Edward's never been particularly mum about the things he hears in people's thoughts, and usually won't hesitate to find some subtle way to call you out on it, especially if it regards him. He smirked. Something tells me you don't have the highest opinion of him. Bella shrugged. There was no point in denying it. It would also explain why he's so frustrated by you. He practically drowns me in the emotion when you're nearby. I always thought it was something else. Something like, what? We are vampires, darling, he reminded her gently, before hesitating. And you are his singer. His what? I've never sung to him a day in my life. Probably bust his eardrums if I tried. Jasper's lips wobbled slightly, and it looked like he was fighting a grin. Not that kind. It's your blood. Your blood is what sings to him. Oh, she replied. Her eyes widened as his implications clicked, and she noticed that Nance looked equally panicked. Oh, should I be worried? Of me, Rose and Emmett. Never. I know that, she said, doing her best to send out her complete faith and trust in him. In them, but Edward, she trailed off nervously. That means a lot, Bella, that you trust us that much, he murmured, his voice slightly choked up. But as for Edward, his jaw tensed. Corza would be the first to swear to you that he has excellent control, and while he hasn't slipped in a very long time, a vampire singer has a tendency to make them irrational. I can't tell you for certain he's not a danger to you, but I can guarantee that me, Emmett, or Rose will always be near, and I want you to promise me that you'll never be alone with him. He paused in consideration, then frowned. Or Alice either. Though all that information had made her incredibly uncomfortable. She also had to admit she was a little surprised that Jasper had included Alice and found it necessary to express this. Not even Alice, she didn't know why she was asking. She could barely stand to be in the same room as her as it was. Yes, Bella, even Alice. Bella bit her lip, nervously tucking a piece of hair behind her ear. Now would definitely be the time to bring up murderous exes. What? Jasper asked softly. Sensing her hesitation, Nan moved closer. Ask him, Shammy, it'll be all right. She nodded in agreement. Did you know about... She wasn't exactly sure how to frame the question, but Jasper seemed to understand what she was asking. Rose said she looked mad that day, that she was glaring at you. Did you see her? Bella nodded. He began pacing, running his hands through his hair in frustration. I honestly don't know. She's never very forthcoming with her visions in the first place. Said. It's her job to protect the future. He sneered. Rose suspected something first, but I was skeptical. I wasn't sure until that night in Port Angeles. He lowered his head in shame. Hey, Bella chided softly, placing a hand underneath his chin and raising his head until his darkened topaz eyes met her own. I hope you don't blame yourself for any of it, Jasper. I don't. He reached up and grabbed her hand, lacing his fingers with hers and lowering them. Can't help it, darling, he muttered self-deprecatingly, as his thumb traced nonsensical patterns on the soft flesh of her hand. I'm used to being in control. and we're not quite certain what she's up to. Is she dangerous? Jasper opened his mouth to reply before clamping it shut again. She's never shown any signs of it in the past, he finally admitted, if not a little reluctantly. Well then buck up, soldier. His lips tilted slightly at the corner. It's Major, remember? Then buck up, Major, she corrected with a roll of her eyes. That's why you invited me to lunch that day, isn't it? She tilted her head thoughtfully, because you were concerned about me. That wasn't just it, Jasper defended, and she chuckled at his assumption that she was offended about it. He pouted cutely at her laughter. I would have done it eventually, he muttered. Well, maybe you should thank her for speeding up the process. Jasper blinked slowly at her response, while Nen let out a huff of laughter in the background. Only you, Chain. Only you. A slow grin stretched Jasper's lips. You're one of a kind, you know that. Count your blessings, Bella quipped cheekily. His eyes became the equivalent of melted gold, as his voice lowered. Oh, I do, darling. I do. Bella cleared her throat as a blush formed on her face, darting her eyes away to look at anything but him. Nan doing the fluttering, girly bit at the sound of his drawls certainly wasn't helping the matters. As desperate as she was to continue whatever this was turning into, she felt like it was important to know everything that she was getting into. It was a little difficult to gather her thoughts while he was still touching her, so she reluctantly released his hand, her heart twinging at the hurt in his eyes when she broke contact. What about Esme and Carlisle? Normally, I would agree that you were safe with them, but considering their tendency to favor Edward and Alice, he trailed off, his meaning all too clear. Probably for the best if you didn't. She inhaled loudly and took everything he said into consideration. Yeah, right. I promised to be careful around them, she swore softly. Thank you, darling. Why did you decide to tell me anyways? Besides Emmett and Rose, do the others know? Yes, the others know. You can imagine how Edward and Alice reacted. Esme and Carlisle were a little more understanding, a bit reluctant, but they gave their blessings anyways. Even if they didn't give it, the three of us would have told you anyways. Why would you do that? Lying to you was hurting us, Bella. It was killing me, he admitted before pausing. And you've known this whole time? Bella nodded sheepishly. A myriad of emotions crossed his face. That certainly explains a lot of things. Bella tilted her head curiously. Like what? Once or twice there was something off about your emotions. Sometimes they never really matched what you were doing or saying. I could never figure out why you felt so guilty all the time. Bella lowered her eyes. Lying to you was hurting me too, she whispered. His eyes softened and he took a step forward, wrapping his arms around her in a tentative hug. She welcomed the embrace, sinking into him with a soft sigh, and he let out his own faint murmur of appreciation. He pulled back with a playful smile, twining a lock of hair around his fingers and giving it a light tug. Could have saved us a lot of trouble if you let us in on the fact that you already knew, and miss out on you and Emmett stumbling over those piss-poor explanations when you did something decidedly supernatural. Never. Jasper scanned his surroundings, noticing the deepening shadows that indicated nightfall was swiftly approaching. It's getting late. I should get you home before Chief Swan deems it necessary to come looking for me with a shotgun. Would that even hurt you? Bella wondered out loud. He grinned. Not a scratch. I'll see you at home, Nan piped up beside her. Seeing as how you've forgotten I'm even here anyways. Sorry, Nan. Don't be. If I had a boy like that to distract me, I'd forget me too. She grinned cheekily and disappeared. Turning around, Jasper bent down slightly and turned his head to look over his shoulder. Interest you in a ride? Bella eyed his back. Are you serious? You scared? He countered, a note of challenge in his voice. Bring it on, Whitlock. She hopped up, plastering herself to his back and wrapping her leg around his waist and her arms around his neck. She blushed when she felt the tremble passing through him, which he tried to cover by taking off in a swift run. As the cool night air whipped through her hair, Bella buried her face in his neck. Hey, Jasper? She murmured against his throat. Yeah? You said you felt everyone's emotions, right? Yeah, a little more uneasy this time. Good does that mean you feel when girls are on their rag? He groaned. So, what is it you want me to do, exactly? Emmett asked, bouncing lightly on his toes. It was the second time Bella had to be asked that question. They were standing in the place that had been deemed Jasper, Rose and Emmett's special spot, and Bella had been touched that they considered her worthy enough to offer her an exclusive membership, Emmett's words to the place. She decided it was definitely an appropriate place to let them in on her secret. Of course, Emmett had immediately demanded some sort of proof. She had been about to offer up her suggestion when Emmett had conveniently walked into a small beam of light that had penetrated the dense foliage. Bella had gaped when his skin burst into 1,000 diamond-like sparkles. What is that? Do you all do that? She stared in wonder at Jasper and Rose when they nodded their agreement. Why didn't you show me that yesterday? She asked Jasper. Must have slipped my mind. That, she exclaimed, pointing at a glowing Emmett. Slipped your mind? She snuck a peek at Nan, who looked torn between amazement and amusement. I was right, Nan. Bram is definitely spinning in his grave right now. She turned her gaze back to Jasper, who looked slightly pained. We could do without the Saturday night fever, darlin'. Bella was embarrassed to realize she had been humming Stayin' Alive under her breath. I'm sorry, she said, attempting to placate a pouting Emmett, who had thankfully moved out of the spotlight. It's just a bit of a shock to the senses. She paused thoughtfully. Guess it explains why you all missed school. Those rare sunny days. Can't very well show up to school lit up like a disco. She trailed off at the 3 blank looks being directed at her, though she could detect humor sparkling behind the similar sets of topaz eyes. Right. That's not the reason we're out here. She flushed. What was I doing again? Proof, Jasper supplied with a smirk. Bella nodded. Right. I want you to run, Emmett. Bella paused and turned to Jasper. How keen are your senses anyways? How far can you hear? Jasper raised an eyebrow. You know Emmett can just go behind that tree and mumble something and you won't hear him. No, but you will. I want to make sure there are no doubts. So how far? At least a mile. Emmett had already taken off before Jasper finished the sentence, Nan unknowingly on his tail. 5 minutes later, Nan appeared first with Emmett only a few seconds behind her. With a grin, Nan floated to Bella's side and, though it really wasn't necessary, leaned over to whisper in her ear. I am not repeating that. Bella yelped, glaring at Emmett as her face flushed. Repeating what? Emmett challenged. That you and Rose, that you guys are... She stomped over to Rose and harshly whispered the rest of it in her ear. Emmett, Rose barked, leveling her own icy glare at him. That was one of those never talk about again moments. Emmett offered his most innocent little boy look. It had to be something nobody else knew, babe. Jasper looked thoughtful. Huh? That explains that night when you came home complaining about pine needles being stuck in your... Shut up, Rose ordered through clenched teeth, shooting him her patented finish that sentence. And I'll rip off your arms and beat you to death, glare. Emmett was too busy being stunned to laugh. Well, I'll be damned, he said, mystified before his face broke into a large, dimpled smile. I can't believe I got little bells to say. Don't, Jasper warned when Bella's cheeks darkened further and Rose's glare intensified. Fine, Emmett pouted. He began to look around. So, she's here right now. Bella nodded her head in the direction of the medium-sized moss-covered rock Nan had drifted over to sit on. Emmett shifted his gaze, squinting his eyes and giving the impression that he believed, if he stared hard enough, she'd suddenly materialize. And she's always around? Bella shrugged. Like this? Yeah, pretty much since I've been 11. She exchanged a fond smile with Nan. Yeah, but I mean, like always. And Bella paused slightly. You better not be asking what I think you're asking, she warned the same time. Jasper groaned. Seriously, Emmett, and Rosie elbowed his gut. Nan was shaking with laughter. My God, Star must have her hands full with him. Bella joined her laughter, nodding her head in agreement. Did she say something? Emmett asked, rubbing his side with a small pout. Yeah, Nan's just wondering how Star puts up with you. Rose cocked one dark, perfectly groomed eyebrow. Star? Bella cringed. Gulg. Sorry. Nan has a tendency to come up with nicknames for everyone. Even when she was alive, she never called anyone by their real names. Ever. Even letters she wrote would be addressed to your nickname. Not to mention a few checks that would turn out to be almost impossible to cash. I think she did that part on purpose, though. Nan flashed her a "Hoomy" smile. You almost get conditioned to it after a while. Do you know how embarrassing it is to almost call your mother Fly when you're talking to her? Fly? Jasper asked this time. Yeah, my mother's sort of flighty. Why, Star? Rose asked curiously. She said you look like a glam movie star from the old pictures she used to love in the 30s. Rose's smile managed to look both flattered and heartbroken at the same time. That's very sweet of her to say. Does this mean I have one too? Jasper questioned with a boyish grin. Bella brushed prettily. She, calls you Ranger? Then started humming the Lone Ranger theme in the background, and Bella flashed her a grin. Quickly catching on to the reference, Jasper's eyes widened with delight. He gestured towards the rock. She's still sitting there, right? Bella nodded. Jasper turned and pantomimed, tipping a cowboy hat. Thank you kindly, ma'am, he said, thickening his drawl to the point where it could be compared to warm molasses. Nan clapped in hands in delight before a thoughtful look stole over her face. Bella was too busy swooning to really pay attention. Rose chuckled lightly at the dreamy look on her face. Me next. Me next. Emmett exclaimed, waving his hand like an overly excited fifth grader. What's mine? Bella snapped back to attention, flickering somewhere between embarrassment and amusement. This should be good, she heard Jasper murmur. It's Duke. Emmett flashed a triumph smile at Rose and Jasper and struck a haughty pose. That's 'cause I'm so regal, right? Not exactly. Rose was nodding her head in encouragement. You see? Nanny had this dog, right? To look at it, it was incredibly intimidating. Huge. The neighborhood kids were equally in awe and terrified of it. They usually went out of their way to avoid him whenever he went out for a walk. It wasn't until they saw how playful he was with me, the two of us loping happily around the yard, that they realized that he was nothing more than a marshmallow inside. Jasper and Rose were chuckling at this point, but Emmett looked confused. I don't get it. The dog's name was Duke. Ah, I share my name with a dog? Emmett sputtered. He died a few years before my name. He was my best friend ever when I was a kid. Bella admitted softly. Emmett's face softened with affection, and he quickly made his way to her and pulled her into a gentle hug, while Rose and Jasper looked on fondly. Guess it's not so bad, he mumbled. He smiled at Bella when he pulled back. Hey, do you have one too? Blushing, she nodded. It's all right, darling, Jasper said. It's probably something special you share with your Nan. You don't have to tell us. I don't mind, sweetheart, Nan assured her. She calls me Chime. She watched as Emmett rolled the name around in his head. Bella. Bells. Chime. It's perfect. Wish I thought of it first, he grumbled. Nan nodded again. Nan says she doesn't mind sharing it. Nah, Emmett replied, taking his place beside Rose again. Jay's right. It's something special between you and your Nan. I respect that. His eyes lit up. Hey, Bells ding, right? How about dinga? Don't even dare. Emmett pouted before brightening up. So, can she do any tricks? Bella frowned. She's not a dog, Emmett. I'm sorry, Emmett said contritely. I mean, does she have any ghostly powers? He waggled his fingers after he said it, making a loud oohing sound. Nah, she pretty much hangs around watching people in the showers. She says nice ass, by the way. Emmett's mouth dropped open, and Jasper mirrored it. Ching! Nan yelped, scandalized. Rosierta's Bella guffawed loudly, clutching at her stomach with tears leaking out of her eyes. I don't know whose face is funnier, you two, or Nan's. She doesn't really watch me in the shower, does she? Emmett chuckled uneasily, looking more than a little disturbed by the thought. Not recently, Bella agreed. Bella Marie Swan, Nan warned lowly. She sighed. Never mess with Nan when she breaks out the full name. No, she assured Emmett. She doesn't. Nan was still glaring at her. Ever, she finished firmly. Emmett nodded with relief, before he trailed his hand cockily over his chest. It's probably a good thing she doesn't. She'd probably die all over again getting a good look at. A rock pinged off the side of his head, hard. It didn't seem to do much damage. In fact, the rock appeared to be worse off, but Emmett rubbed at the spot it had hit. The hell? One of Nat's tricks, Bella mocked. Does she move it with her mind? Jasper asked curiously. Nope. She pretty much just picks it up. His eyebrows rose. She can touch solid objects? Bella nodded, and passed through them just as easily. She could see the next question in Rosie's eyes. Other than me, inanimate objects only. She could tell they were disappointed. I'm not sure why the rules don't apply to me. I think it might be because I needed her to be solid. Rosie's eyes softened with understanding. You have to let me borrow her, Emmett exclaimed, rubbing his hands together and chuckling diabolically. Oh, the fun I could have with Eddie boy. Bella frowned when Nan looked like she was seriously considering it. No, she told both of them. But Emmett whined. Not a chance, Rose warned. Can she do anything else? Jasper asked, his features a cross between serious and eager. Well, we can talk to each other mentally, she pointed at her head to emphasize. And seeing the look everyone was giving her, she clarified, but she can't read anyone's mind. And other than that, she occasionally gets these, well, feelings. Feelings? Jasper echoed. Are you saying she knows things? He managed to look both amused and sour at the same time. And Bella just knew there was a story there. She'd have to ask him later. I guess you could say that it's usually bad things, though, she hesitated, of the life-threatening sort. Huh? Emmett yelled suddenly, making the three of them jump. He ignored Rose's scowl and pointed his finger at Bella. The van, Bella agreed. Emmett preened at being right. And I thought the ninja theory was cool. Jasper's face was serious. Does it happen often? Bella turned to Jasper and shook her head. No, it's only happened once before, when our house burnt to the ground. He looked pensive as he considered her answer. I know what you're thinking, and according to what you've told me about it, it doesn't work like Alice's. Nanda doesn't actually see anything. She just gets feelings a few seconds before it happens, a minute at the most, and makes judgments based on that. Nan looked ashamed at the lack of range her gift had. Don't be sorry, Nan, Bella spoke out loud. Jasper turned in Nan's direction with a nod. She's right, don't be sorry. Your gift has already saved her twice. Never be sorry for that. He walked over towards Bella and wrapped his hands around her upper arms, staring at her intently. Promise me you'll tell one of us if she ever gets these feelings when we're around. I promise, Bella replied before hesitating. But if we're in mixed company, I can't exactly blurt out that Nan's got one of her feelings, though. Jasper looked thoughtful for a moment before a smile spread over his face. Don't? Just say Van. Bella grinned and nodded before finally noticing the dimmed smile on Rose's lips. What's wrong? She asked hesitantly. It's nothing. She hesitated. I was just thinking how fitting it was that your grandmother thinks I look like a 30s movie star, because that's when I was turned. Nan looked crestfallen. Oh dear. Chime, please tell her I didn't mean to bring up any bad memories. Maine wants me to tell you she's sorry if she made you rehash anything. No, Rose hurriedly assured. It's a great nickname. She flashed a small smile in the direction of the rock. Certainly better than any of the other ones I've been called over the years. Emmett moved to wrap an arm around her when she released a small shuddery breath. I should tell you my story. Bella shook her head. You don't have to. I understand if you don't feel ready. She felt strangely hurt by the next part. I know you haven't known me for very long and... No, Rose cut in. You've shared such a big secret with us, and it's only fair that I show I trust you enough to do the same. She looked up at Bella. And I do. Trust you, I mean. As strange as it is for me, I trust you. You've already told me your biggest secret. That's more than enough. I want to tell you, Rose replied firmly. She took a moment to gather her strength. It was 1933. I was 18, and I was beautiful. My life was perfect. By the time she was finished her story, which had blended into Emmett's as well, Rose was huddling in Emmett's arms as he cooed softly at her, and Bella was wrapped in Jasper's, tears running down her cheeks. What do you say to something like that? What can you say? I'm so sorry, Bella choked out. Though her eyes were still haunted, Rose managed a small smile. It's all right, though I wouldn't wish what happened to me on anyone. In the end, it led me to the brother I never had. My twin. She gazed at Jasper with sisterly affection before turning back to Emmett and to my soulmate. Emmett's eyes were suspiciously wet as he pulled her into a crushing hug. I love you, Rosie, Bella heard him whisper. When they finally pulled out of the hug, Bella watched as Nan floated to Rose's side and hovered her hands in a caressing motion over her cheeks, humming softly to her. Jasper? Rose asked, mystified. Is that you? Jasper's hand paused in running, though, Bella's hair. Is what me? I feel such comfort. No, Rose, it's not... Bella lifted her head up from Jasper's shoulder. It's Nan, she's singing to you. It's what she used to do when I was a kid and I was sad or wasn't feeling well. Rosie's grateful topaz eyes unknowingly connected with Nan's. What's she singing? Twinkle, twinkle, little star? Thank you, Rose whispered. You're welcome, my little star. Tears pooled in Bella's eyes again. She had never wished that other people could see or hear her grandmother more than in this exact moment. She felt a cool hand caress her cheek and wiped the tears away. Are you all right, darling? Afraid her voice would crack if she spoke, Bella settled for simply nodding. Detangling herself from Jasper's arms, she walked over to Rose, and not sure how receptive she'd be. wrapped her arms around her in a cautious hug. She relaxed into it when it was returned. "Thank you for telling me," she said as she pulled away. She looked around at Jasper and Emmett. "Thank you all for telling me," her lip wobbled, "for trusting me." She broke down into harsh sobs. "What is it?" Jasper asked, bewildered, rushing to her side to pull her back into his arms. I forced you to tell me all this," she choked out between sobs, her shoulders shaking. "Nobody forced us to do anything, darling." Jasper shushed. "But I did," she wailed. "Constantly offering you food and making you uncomfortable, and getting mad over the stupidest thing ever. I didn't mean to, but at the same time I knew exactly what I was doing. I'm a terrible person." Jasper chuckled lightly and rubbed his knuckles across her damp, ruddy cheek. "You're adorable," he murmured affectionately. Bella gasped indignantly and pushed him away. "I'm being serious." "So am I. I wanted to tell you from after the first day you sat down with us at lunch." Bella's tears tapered when she looked over her shoulder and found Rose and Emmett were nodding in agreement. "I should thank you for speeding up the process," he said cheekily, echoing what she had said about Alice the other day. She pushed lightly at his chest, keeping her fingers there and spreading them unconsciously over his non-beating heart. "Why?" she asked. "Why did we tell you?" Jasper clarified. She nodded. Jasper reached up and cupped his cool hands around hers. "Because we knew from that moment what you were." "What am I?" It was Rose who answered. "Family." Her breath hitched as she looked over her shoulder at Rose, tears welling up in her eyes at the soft, genuine smile on her face, and the answering one on Emmett's. But the look on Jasper's face meant the most, because in his eyes, she could see that she was so much more than that. Group hug. Emmett could have shouted the words boisterously as he was wont to do, but instead they were spoken softly, almost reverently, as the three of them crowded around her, securing her loosely in their embrace. And even knowing she was surrounded by vampires that could easily crush her with the slightest amount of pressure, Bella had never felt safer in her life. "Nan," she beckoned, reaching out her hand. Nan stepped forward and entwined her fingers with Bella, and all was complete in her world. The embrace was broken after a few long, silent moments, and Jasper could hear that even the forest had gone quiet, as if in disbelief of what was happening. For a human to be so wrapped so trustfully in the arms of three vampires, her emotions reflecting nothing but complete trust, and his breath hitched, love, was a practically unheard of event, especially since it was instinctive for humans to naturally distrust them, like an animal sensing a predator in their midst. She really was one of a kind. He could feel the familial bonds strengthening, not just between Bella, Emmett, and Rose, but the ones he shared with them as well, becoming almost tangible as the lingering ties he felt towards the rest of the Cullens. Though it was nowhere near a familial bond, you couldn't spend decades with someone and not have some sort of connection form, which had been fraying over the years, thinned even further. He opened his eyes and looked at the two of them over Bella's head, and they nodded in agreement, signaling that they felt it too. He wondered what this would mean for the four of them, and if the Cullens felt the ties severing as well. He doubted it. They were ridiculously reluctant to acknowledge their vampiric sides, and you had to dig in deep when addressing bonds. Emmett and Rose stepped back first, but Jasper was content to keep Bella in his arms for a few seconds longer, unable to stop the light purr of affection, which was an involuntary reaction, and one of the more humiliating vampiric traits their kind had in response to absolute bliss. The upside was that only mates could produce that sound. Bella pulled back, slightly wide-eyed, and her cheeks pinkened. She giggled and buried her face in the fabric covering his chest, rubbing her flushed cheeks across it. Jasper could feel the heat of her, though, the fabric, and was embarrassed when the rumble in his chest deepened even more so at Bella's next words. "Pretty kitty," Bella murmured. The embarrassment disappeared and he clutched her closer as a sappy smile spread over his face when he felt the love and affection swirling through her emotions after she said it. The smile turned into a chuckle when he noticed Emmett shifting off to the side, obviously a little uncomfortable with the affection overload. "Teeth hurting just a little," Emmett teased, finally releasing Bella. He grinned, and Jasper could tell he was relieved to be back in familiar territory. "I am feeling a bit of a sugar high," he agreed, grinning mischievously. "Pretty kitty." Jasper was tempted to reach over snap off a limb, but Bella took care of it by flicking Emmett's earlobe hard. It was probably the only body part of a vampire you could hit like that without fear of breaking your fingers. "No teasing, monkey man," Bella warned, curling her lips deviously. If Jasper wasn't certain of it before, he definitely was now. "Oh God, I love her." Emmett turned to Rose with a wounded stare, horrified that she had shared the embarrassing nickname she had for him, which Jasper knew was due to his penchant for having to climb at least one tree every time he went out to hunt. Jasper smirked when Rose shrugged unapologetically. Emmett pouted, attempting to milk the moment. Seeing that he wasn't getting any sympathy, he sighed loudly and conceded defeat. Breaking out into a dimpled grin, he slung his arm over Bella's shoulder. "You know, you're like the sister I always wanted." Bella grinned. "What about Alice?" "Even more so after her." The three of them chuckled. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and Jasper looked up at the pieces of gray sky that was peeking through the trees. "Looks like it's gonna rain. We should really head back." Offering his back to Bella, he took off in the direction of the house, the other two following swiftly behind. They were cutting through their backyard 10 minutes later when their progress was halted. When Alice ran out the door, shouting, "Where have you been? Didn't see us coming?" Emmett quipped. Jasper smirked. He would never get tired of that. Alice hated it when her gift was called into question, and Emmett never hesitated to take every opportunity he was given to mock her. "Very funny," Alice huffed. "Now hurry, we'll be leaving soon." "Leaving?" Bella asked, panicked. "Where?" Alice waved a dainty hand. "Oh, it's just something we do as a family whenever it thunders. You probably wouldn't be interested." Judging by the sudden stiffness of Bella, he guessed she hadn't missed the extra emphasis Alice had put on family and glared in her direction. She rolled her eyes and turned her head away in response. Thankfully, Bella's trepidation vanished when Emmett's exuberance once again came unknowingly to the rescue and he began bouncing on the balls of his feet. "Are you kidding?" he replied, excitedly. "I can't believe I almost forgot. It's been months since the last time we got to do this. You have to come, Bells." "Again, where?" "To play baseball, of course." "You guys play baseball?" Bella questioned as Jasper dug through his closet, a little amused that vampires did something so human only when it thunders. "Why then?" "Helps cover the sound it makes." He made a little aha sound as his hands closed around a white garment, and he pulled it out. "Is it really that loud?" "Louder." He held up the garment, which turned out to be a baseball jersey. It had Whitlock stitched on the back in navy over the number 14. "Why 14? "Inside joke," he rolled his eyes. "Emmett's, of course. It's referring to the number of decades we've been a vampire. We get new ones every 10 years. I'm actually due to get a new one next year." There was hesitation in his eyes as he looked up at her, and she had the feeling that he was regretting reminding her again how old he truly was, like she'd be disgusted by it. Although she could admit to be a little unsettled at how much experience he had undoubtedly acquired in that time, disgust had never factored in. It hadn't the first time she'd realized his true age, not for a single second, and it would stay that way. "Anyone ever tell you that you look pretty good for an old guy?" she asked flirtatiously, proud that she managed to keep her blush at bay. She knew her flirting skills were a little okay, a lot rusty. She seemed to get the message across, though, because he grinned, the clouds disappearing from behind his eyes. "The other one says hail, but I want you to wear this one. Will you, Dalen?" She'd do anything as long as he kept calling her that. "Of course," she replied with a giddy grin. Jasper returned it and slipped it over her long-sleeved t-shirt. She was immediately surrounded in the scent of dark chocolate and cinnamon. His pale fingers reached for the buttons and slowly began to do them up. Bella was certain this was the most seductive thing she had ever experienced. "You look good," he murmured huskily when he finished with the last button. Bella held her breath as he shifted his head closer to hers, his eyes trailing down to her lips. "Very good," he reiterated, his cool, sweet breath whispering across her face. Bang, bang, bang. "Aren't you guys ready yet?" Alice's irritated voice spoke from the other side of the door. Jasper jerked away with a curse. "You can go, we'll meet you there," he barked. "Well, hurry up, we're wasting thunder." Bella rolled her eyes. "Sure." The footsteps retreated as Jasper stalked over to the closet to angrily retrieve his own shirt. Bella leaned back slightly towards the window behind her and watched 6 figures dart into the woods. She grinned when Emmett turned briefly to wave up at her. She turned back in time to see Jasper do up the final button, her heart stuttering at the intense look he was giving her. "What?" she asked hoarsely. He shook his head slowly, then turned and offered his back, like she did earlier. She climbed on and wrapped her legs around his waist. He slipped her arms under her knees and shifted to line himself up with the window. "Bella." "Next time, I won't be stopped." He pushed open the window and leapt, just like her heart. So, anything happen? Nan asked excitedly. Bella eyed the others who were currently discussing the game plan and grinned wryly. Is that why you mysteriously disappeared when we got back to the house? Nan gave a sly, I'll never tell grin. Well, did it? No, Bella sighed. I think it was going to, but Alice interrupted us. A stormy look clouded Nang's face. I really don't like that girl, Chame. Do you think maybe she did it deliberately? It was clear she was referring to her visions. I don't know, Bella admitted uncomfortably. Did she mention how much that creeped her out? The fact that they could be fine-tuned enough to prevent a single kiss. Was this going to happen every time? Her eyes sought out Jasper and her mind eased slightly when he sent her a flirtatious wink. He likes me, doesn't he, Nan? Likes you? Nan scoffed. That boy is absolutely gaga for you. I find it hard to believe I could make a vampire gaga, especially one that looks like him. She took a moment to admire his lean form in the loose baseball jersey over a dark blue thermal, black jeans, and dark sneakers. None of that. You sell yourself too short, Chime. You haven't seen how boys look at you. How that boy looks at you. You are such a beautiful girl, both inside and out, and I'll haunt anyone who tries to make you believe differently. Knowing Nan, she probably would. I think I'm going to pitch this game, Jasper loudly interjected. But I always pitch, Alice whined. Bella could almost see the tenseness in the air as Rose exchanged a look with Jasper. I think it's time to switch it up, she agreed. Couldn't hurt, Carlisle concluded. You can have the next game, Alice. Fine, she pouted petulantly. Then I'm up to bat first. The rest of the group dispersed with Jasper, Emmett, and Edward going out into the field. Bella watched, awed as, no matter who was swinging it, the bat connected to the ball every time, easily hitting it the length of 2 football fields. Just as amazing was Emmett or Edward disappearing in the woods. Emmett even scrambling up a tree once. She now got the nickname Monkey Man, returning only moments later and throwing the claimed ball in the direction of home. The time between hitting, running, catching, and throwing was mere seconds, and she spent the next 10 minutes watching the whole thing with a childlike fascination. She understood now why they played during a storm. The cracking noise every hit made rivaled the thunder in its intensity. Bella's turn, Emmett suddenly boomed from the outfield. Bella looked up wide-eyed. I don't think so. The last time she had attempted to play baseball, her gym teacher had finally taken pity on her after 4 balls and let her walk. Of course she'd made it worse when she somehow managed to trip over a rock on the way there and face planted into first base. The teacher yelling out, "That's the first time I ever saw someone slide into first with their face," hadn't helped matters either. "I'll go easy on you, darling," Jasper called. Bella began to hesitantly approach the area designated as home, freezing when Alice sneered at her back. "Yeah, show us what you got, Bella. Pinch hitter," Emmett hollered, scowling at Alice as he switched positions with Rose and jogged up to Bella's side. He grabbed hold of her arm when Bella attempted to return to her spot. Bells, he scolded, positioning her slightly to the left of the base. "You stay right there." "Let's see what you got, Ape," Jasper taunted. "Bring it, Mood Ring." Jasper pitched the ball so fast this time that Bella's human eyes could barely track the motion. The only clue that he even threw it was the satisfying crack as it connected with Emmett's swinging bat. "All right," Bella cheered. Tossing the bat aside, Emmett yelled, "Hop on, Bells." So caught up in the excitement, Bella didn't hesitate jumping on his back. She squealed when he took off around the bases, which soon turned to giddy laughter as Emmett kept up a steady stream of chatter as he passed each base. Him and Bells take first and second and third. They're going for a home run, ladies and gentlemen. They headed towards home base, where a determined Alice stood with her hands out. Emmett's feet touched the base just as the wild throw Rose had tossed flew 5 feet past where Alice was positioned. "What the hell was that?" she screamed. With a smirk, Rose shrugged. Slipped. Ignoring the fuming girl, Emmett slipped Bella off his back and, taking her hands in his, began jumping around as gently as he could, singing, "Home run." As silly as Bella felt, she got caught up in Emmett's giddiness and chimed in. Breaking away from her hands, Emmett pointed at Alice. "You suck," he taunted. Then, realizing what he just said, burst into boisterous laughter. Literally, Bella's own giggles choked off when Alice sent her a poisonous stare. "I believe it's Carlisle's turn now," she spat. Bella stepped back as the dapper doctor approached the plate, jerking to a stop when she saw the panicked look on Nan's face. "Man. Chamish? Oh no, please, not that tone." "Don't react," Nan warned when Bella's face began to crumple in fear. She threw a pointed look at Alice. Just let Ranger feel it. Easier said than done. Jasper, who was winding up for a pitch, halted when in felt the sudden shift in Bella's emotions. "Bella," he beseeched, lowering his arm. He grew even more worried at the fearful, wide-eyed look that she immediately tried to hide. He watched as the muscles in her face ticked. He let the ball roll from his fingers as he approached her side. "You feeling okay, darlin'?" he murmured. He didn't know why, but it felt like the proper choice to be a little vague so as not to draw attention to her churning emotions. Standing in front of Bella and blocking her from everyone's view, he encouraged her to mouth her concerns. Her lips formed one word. Van. He flashed back to earlier that day, and the significance of the word, and felt ice freeze the venom in his veins. Immediately feeling himself fall into what Emmett cheekily referred to as major mode, he scanned the field, but couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. Catching the eye of Emmett and Rose, who were approaching him from the side, he mouthed the same word. He wasn't sure if Alice sensed anything from their interactions. More likely she was just annoyed that spotlight wasn't on her. But seconds later, her voice rung out, colored in the same far-off tone that usually indicated a vision. "They're coming. 3 of them. They were going to pass us by, but they heard Emmett's atrocious singing." Rose snarled at her when she ended her sentence with a pointed glare at Emmett. "Is it bad?" Jasper mouthed. He watched her look to the side, before offering a helpless shrug. Jasper nodded. "Emmett," he barked, "give me your hoodie." Not even bothering to question him, Emmett unzipped the dark blue hoodie and wordlessly handed it over. Jasper threw it over her shoulders, allowing only the briefest thought at how adorable she looked, swaddled in the 4 sizes too big garment. Zipping it up, he instructed Bella to tuck her hair back. "Rose?" he asked. Understanding what he was asking, Rose removed the ball cap from her head and passed it to him. "Tuck your hair up in this, darlin'." He flipped up the hoodie when Bella did as he requested, so it practically hid her face from sight. "I can only hope their scents, added to the faint one on my own shirt, will be enough to cover up yours." "Are you kidding?" I can still smell her disgusting scent from here. Alice stepped back at the 3 snarls that were directed at her. "Alice," Carlisle warned. Attempting to get the heat off her, she turned her gaze inwards. "They'll be here in 20 seconds. "Stay behind us, darlin', and keep your head down," Jasper ordered, before turning his back to her. Emmett and Rose stepped up beside him, forming an impenetrable wall. Burying her head in his tense shoulders, Jasper felt Bella nod. "I'm scared, Nan." "Have faith in your vampires and their strengths and abilities, Chang." "My vampires," the thought strangely soothed her. Exactly 20 seconds later, Bella heard the rustle of clothes signaling the arrival of the 3 newcomers. She was desperate to peek, but wouldn't break her promise to Jasper. "Lane, there are 3 of them," like she said. 2 are male, 1 blonde, 1 dark-skinned, and a female. And, she trailed off with a gasp. "What is it?" "Red. Their eyes are red." "Oh God," Bella whimpered. Trembling, she listened as Carlisle made introductions and a falsely friendly conversation was exchanged. Judging by the single, lightly accented voice, only one of the vampires was making the effort to be polite. That changed when a game was suggested. What the hell are they thinking? Bella thought frantically. Judging by the low growl she could feel vibrating through his back, Jasper didn't appreciate the suggestion either, and a feminine voice claimed, "I'm the one with the wicked curveball." Unable to resist the urge to see what a vampire with red eyes looked like if they differed in some ways from her own vampires, and ignoring Nan shaking her head, Bella peeked between Jasper and Rose's shoulders. At the same time, a huge gust of wind caught the hood of the sweatshirt just right and blew it and Rose's hat right off her head. Her eyes widened in panic when the blonde male inhaled greedily and turned hungry, dark eyes to Bella. "I see you brought a snack." She stumbled backwards when 3 simultaneous roars split the air and Jasper, Emmett, and Rose darted forward. Falling to her knees, Bella clamped her hands over her ears and curled into herself, desperately trying to block out the sight and sound of battle. She silently prayed this wouldn't be the last time she saw her vampires. "Bella," a soft voice whispered. Blinking, Bella stared at the navy fabric that encased the arms her head was buried in. She winced slightly at the tense feeling in her jaw from clenching her teeth so hard. Was it over? Was she dead? Were her vampires dead? Was Jasper dead? "Darlin'," the same husky voice came again, sending warmth through her entire body. She knew that voice. "Jasper," she murmured, finally looking up into the melted gold eyes of the man crouched in front of her. "Jasper," she repeated, Her voice choked up as tears overflowed and ran down her cheeks. He was okay. She threw herself in his arms and he stood, bringing her up with him and returning her desperate hug as hard as he could without hurting her. Pulling back slightly, she tangled her fingers in his golden locks and, uncaring that they had an audience that included his bitter ex, and Hernan pulled his lips to hers. The tears strengthened when they lightly touched and the world around them stilled. She kept the pressure gentle, neither making the move to deepen it. This was a kiss of fear, of relief, and more importantly, of love. A voice coughed from the side. We risked life and limb, too. I'm not saying you have to kiss us, but... The cheeky words were followed by a grunted oof and a softly hissed Emmett. Tearing away from Jasper as much as she was bereft to do so, Bella looked over his shoulders at a slightly mussed Emmett and Rose. With a soft, understanding smile, Jasper released her from his arms, and she skirted around him to run towards them. She stopped short when she saw the jagged claw marks across Emmett's broad chest, the venom leaking out and staining the white wife-beater he wore. Noticing where her horrified gaze was focused, Emmett looked down. What, this? Nothing more than a scratch, he assured her. Seeing that she still looked dubious, he pulled the shirt up. Look, it's already starting to heal. It wouldn't be so bad, but I think the bitch licked her fingers. Bella turned her confused gaze to Jasper. A vampire's venom is one of the few things that can cause significant damage to us. He rubbed his arms. If it's deep enough and there's enough venom involved, it also has a tendency to scar. Bella turned mournful eyes to Emmett. Those marks will be permanent. Nah, it was just a little, and she really only got the surface. By the time I feed, it'll be completely gone. It's the truth, Bella, Rose said. Thankfully, the worst damage done to her appeared to be her torn clothes and the dirt smudged on her cheek. Bella had never seen her so messy. And she still looks perfect, she grumbled. He's had worse injuries before. She shot Emmett a mini glare. Just can't stay out of trouble. Convinced by Rose's snarkiness, Bella's feet ate up the last few steps, and she looped her arms around both of their necks. I was so worried, she blubbered as Rose patted her gently on the back. Takes more than a few vamps to hurt me, Emmett boasted. Bella pulled away and looked pointedly at his chest. Scratch, Emmett insisted. Scanning the field, Bella shuddered as she looked at the scattered parts. A blonde head, here, a leather jacket-clad torso, there, a dark-skinned arm just off to the side, She frowned and stared a little harder. Something didn't look right. Something... Missing, Bella remarked out loud. Coming up behind her, Jasper growled. The third one, the female, managed to get away. He glared accusingly at the Cullens, as if realizing they were still there. Bella followed his gaze and immediately understood his frustration. The four standing off to the side were completely unruffled, not a hair out of place. In fact, they looked irritated more than anything, and like the day of the van, shuddered rage burned in Alice's eyes. Emmett looked ashamed as he fingered the tears in his shirt. She got the jump on me. I tried to chase after her, but she was so fast, I lost her after a mile. It wasn't you, Jasper assured him. Why didn't you stop her? He growled at the Cullens. She ran right past you. I tried, Edward sniffed indignantly, then scoffed. He tried all right, Cham. He feinted a lunge and didn't put up a fight when she easily pushed him aside. His efforts barely wrinkled his clothes. Jasper seemed to share her opinion. Tried my ass? We shouldn't have to resort to violence, son, Carlisle stated diplomatically. We could have... Violence? Jasper scoffed. They sure as hell didn't hesitate to resort to it. They could have killed my Bella. His Bella? Did I hear that right? You heard right, Cham. You did attack them first, Carlisle reminded. Jasper's face darkened. You know very well what they would have done if we hadn't, he spoke lowly, his accent deepening and roughing up the words. You didn't have to kill them. Rosier looked disgusted as she stepped forward. I'm sorry, Carlisle, but what exactly did you expect us to do? Let them go and hope that they abide by the "this is our territory" rule? Surely you've seen the paper, the 3 mysterious deaths yesterday. Obviously a pack of nomads could care less about whatever claim you think you may have on this town. Carlisle looked shocked, obviously not used to Rose talking to him this way, and Bella felt strangely proud of her. Something told her it took real guts to stand up to your maker. I guess we'll never know, will we? She could tell he was trying to be casual about it, but there was a haughtiness to his words that was equivalent to someone saying, you're wrong and I'm right. Bella had to admit she was unnerved by the thought that he'd be so willing to chance her being ripped apart just so he could retain his neutrality. She wondered if he'd be off to the side saying, "We can talk about this," as the three of them sunk their teeth into whatever body part of hers they could. She hid a small, satisfied grin when her vampires seemed to be just as appreciative of his tone, and were currently glaring at him. He cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Well, since you think you have the situation handled." He exchanged a look with Edward and Alice, then touched Esme's shoulder lightly. Though the matriarch looked the most reluctant of the four, she nodded and acquiesced to her mate. "We'll meet you back at the house then," Carlisle confirmed, and Esme and Edward darted off. Bella frowned when Alice remained unmoving, her face blank. Surely she wasn't staying behind to help. Her attention was drawn away from her still figure when Jasper approached her side. He pointed to the edge of the field. "I want you to go stand over there with Rose." "Jasper? Please, Bella!" Behind him she could see Emmett silently gathering the body parts together and arranging them in a pile in the center of the field, where the grass was the thinnest. She heard a clink and turned back to Jasper, just in time to see him remove a silver lighter from his pocket. Immediately realizing what it was for, she absently wondered why he carried the thing around. Did he constantly expect to be attacked? He must have noticed her look. "I'm used to being prepared," he muttered darkly. Old habits die hard. As much as she didn't want to leave his side, she understood why he was asking. The two male vampires might no longer be human, but they still looked it, and she knew she wasn't prepared to witness their body parts burning, especially when she knew that they still weren't technically dead. Her and Jasper had talked a little more when she had arrived home the night he'd told her his secret and found that Charlie had been called in to the station. He had went into a bit more detail about what it was like to be a vampire, even satisfying her morbid curiosity regarding their true death in an effort to debunk her stubborn beliefs about stakes. Thanks to the fact that they appeared to be universal in all vampire movies, albeit a bit more reluctantly. She had learned that a vampire wasn't truly dead until their head and their heart were completely destroyed. I wonder if they can still feel everything, if they can still scream. She couldn't help the shudder that passed through her at the thought, and she looked away from what Emmett was doing. Jasper's jaw clenched as his fingers curled tightly around the lighter in his hand. She traced her own fingers across his knuckles. "Careful," she tutted softly. "You'll crush it." She reached that same hand up and smoothed it across his cheek, meeting his eyes beseechingly, trying to convey that she didn't think any less of him for what he had done or what he was about to do. The small smile that stretched his lips was bitter but grateful, and he dusted a faint kiss across her upturned forehead. "Go," he ordered softly, pushing her towards Rose, giving him one last lingering look over her shoulder. She walked into Rose's outstretched arms, and the two walked silently off the field. Jasper pensively watched the flickering flames, tensing when Alice sauntered over his side. He had almost forgotten she had stayed behind. "You're a fool," she hissed. "Not now, Alice." "Did you know the blonde one was that girl's mate?" she asked casually, inspecting her nails. "Like I give a shit." Jasper sneered. Alice leaned in close, keeping her words low. "You'd care if she came back seeking revenge for the death of her mate. What's that saying?" She tapped her chin thoughtfully. "An eye for an eye." Jasper grabbed her upper arms roughly, black bleeding into his irises. "What have you seen?" he snarled. "Nothing," Alice stuttered, fear completely drenching her emotions. "I can't even see her half the time." She looked and felt so frustrated by the fact that Jasper was almost inclined to believe her. "Almost. What do you mean you can't see her?" "I mean exactly that," she huffed, and Jasper could sense she was embarrassed and confused at the limitations her gift suddenly had, something he knew for a fact she had never experienced in the past. "She's fuzzy. Any vision with her is—" His grip on her arms loosened as he considered her words. He wondered if Bella's grandmother had anything to do with it. If her ghostly presence was somehow causing interference, it might also explain why Edward couldn't hear her thoughts and why her emotions were sometimes difficult to get a lock on. Alice mistook his sudden silence for something in her favor, raising a hand to brush against his cheek. "I'm just concerned about you, whatever you may think. I still love you, and I don't like the fact that you're so willing to risk everything for this girl." "Jazz," she murmured. He cringed away from her touch. "Don't call me that," he snapped, pushing her back. "And never talk about Bella like that again." "Fine," Alice replied venomously, smoothing out the wrinkles his hands had put in her shirt. "But you know I'm right. You're not thinking things through clearly. Carlisle was right. Attacking them was foolish. You don't know anything about them." "They were nomads." Maybe they were, or maybe they were the leaders of a powerful coven of vampires who will come looking for them if they don't come back. Jasper was amused, though the red-haired female had speed on her side. A single newborn was more powerful than the three that had attacked them. There was no way they even possessed a tenth of the authority required to lead a coven of vampires. The thought that her gift wasn't working correctly became even more possible. She seemed to be grasping at straws. You really don't know what's going on, do you? Alice's face darkened. I'm just trying to make a point, jazzed Jasper, one you should listen to. Listen, he asked, lowly. You practically threaten my mate's... He smirked when Alice flinched. That's right, my mate's life. And expect me to listen to you? He leaned his face in closer. I may not know what, or if you really knew anything about this time or the others. Alice turned her head away, but he roughly grabbed her jaw and forced it back. Yes, you know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you? I might not be able to prove it, but if I ever find out you do know something... The fire popped, and he drew back with a cruel smile, stretching his lips, jerking his thumb in its direction. You'll be joining them. Alice stumbled back and gulped loudly before turning around to take off in the direction the Cullens had went. Jasper waited until she had disappeared completely into the tree line before allowing his shoulders to slump as confliction warred heavily in him. Thanks to Alice's words, he was desperate to seek out the red-haired she-bitch and rip her apart, but because of the newness of the mating bond, he couldn't leave Bella's side. To do so would cause her and himself a lot of pain and weaken them both significantly, and he obviously couldn't tote her around the country, chasing a vampiress who was undoubtedly unstable due to the loss of her mate. For that reason, he couldn't send Emmett and Rose either. While he didn't doubt their abilities at defending themselves in the slightest, an unstable vampire made for a very unpredictable and dangerous opponent. He'd never be able to forgive himself if something happened to them. He thought briefly about calling his second-in-command, but was concerned he was jumping the gun. He hated going into a situation half-cocked. For now, he would wait, keep his guard up, and hope that he wasn't making the wrong choice. That what Emmett had said in the forest that day was right, that Alice was just jealous. If he had known things were going to be this complicated when he first decided to approach Bella, he looked over his shoulder where Bella was huddled with Rose, shooting him a weak smile as he began walking in her direction. When he was close enough, Bella broke from Rose's embrace and ran into his. Is everything all right? She asked hesitantly, and he could sense her trepidation over his discussion with Alice. He allowed a passing moment of amusement. It wasn't the first time that she'd felt this, and he sometimes got the feeling that she thought all it would take was a simple interaction with Alice to have him falling back into her arms. Never again, he thought fiercely, pulling Bella's soft body closer. Everything's fine, darling, he said out loud. Burying his head in her hair, he inhaled her soothing scent and decided that even if he had known the complications that would come with it, he still would have done it anyways. Are you sure you're all right? I'm fine, Bella replied. It was official. She had said that phrase more in the last month and a half than she had said in her entire life. Charlie? She looked around her bedroom, focusing on the clock on her bedside table, and noted the early hour. Won't be home for a few hours. Jasper swallowed loudly and turned away. I'm sorry you had to see that, he whispered. I didn't actually see anything, she grinned sadly. Well then, you shouldn't have had to hear it. I never wanted you to see that side of me. Your protective side. Yes, no, you know what I mean. He self-consciously fingered the sleeves of his shirt. Bella stepped closer to him and began pushing up one sleeve. What are you? His words choked off when she began gently tracing the bite marks. This side, you mean? She asked softly. They don't they scare you? Nothing about you scares me. If anything, it makes me angry. I hate that you had to suffer through this. Her hand paused and she looked away guiltily. But at the same time, his hand came up to cradle her chin and coaxed her liquid eyes back to him. What? At the same time, in their own way, they brought you to me, she whispered. A tear trailed down her cheek. I'm sorry that sounds It was her turn to be cut off when Jasper's lips softly connected with her own. He slid his hand around the base of her neck, slowly trailing it up to cup the back of her head, as the kiss lost its hesitance and grew heated. He nipped lightly at her bottom lip, fighting a full-body shudder when she immediately opened her mouth and tentatively brought her warm tongue out to touch his own. His senses were suddenly overwhelmed as the first real taste of her, like sun-warmed peaches, burst over his tongue, and the faint scent of her growing arousal tickled his nostrils. He pulled back slightly to gather his bearings, leaning his forehead against hers and fighting with his desire to crush her to him and take what she was so willingly offering. She released a small, whimpering sigh when their lips broke the connection and his control snapped. He slammed his mouth back down on hers. Any trace of hesitance was gone, replaced by moving lips and warring tongues. Hands got tangled in hair, heads were tilted, and personal space was ignored as Bella plastered her body as close to Jasper's as possible. He pulled away and licked his lips, savoring the taste of Bella on them, and admired the color high in her cheeks, the barest hint of relief spreading through him when he realized the sudden rush of blood roaring through her veins wasn't affecting him in the slightest. He caressed her cheek softly as her eyelids fluttered and she panted lightly. The pleasant haze in his mind cleared as he looked around, suddenly remembering where they were. He chuckled, "Please tell me your Nan isn't here." Bella's eyes popped open, and she felt the flush in her cheeks deepen as she hesitantly looked around the room. "No," she breathed gratefully. "I think she kind of has a sense for, these things." A faintly disgruntled look crossed his face as he focused on a point over her shoulder. "And do these things happen often?" he asked calmly. "You're the first," she admitted softly. He pulled her close to him and buried his face in her neck, murmuring what sounded like "good" against her throat. They stood silent, just enjoying the closeness for a few long moments. "Bella," he breathed into her skin. She replied, curling her body closer to his and lazily running her fingers through his hair. He pulled back, naked vulnerability shining in his topaz eyes, as he traced his fingers along the delicate bone structure of her face. "I love you." Bella's breath caught. Other than her family, and only rarely from anyone other than Nan, no one had ever said those words to her before, and she had never said them either. Having never felt that way about anyone before, she never had any reason to. But staring up at this amazing, strong, caring, beautiful man, she suddenly had all the reason in the world. "I love you too,"